Everybody, welcome to the Whanganui Council agenda for Tuesday the 28th of July. My apologies, we're anticipating starting at 9. We're just a few minutes late with that. But so we will rattle through this, and you'll all be very aware that we've got times that we need to consider today to complete this agenda by 12:30. Before we go into public excluded items at 1 PM today, ahead of 3:30, when we will be travelling by to Waimakariri. So just we're all familiar with health and safety, but should we need to exit the building out the door we've entered, and the assembly point has not changed. We've got everybody here today, so thank you. So no apologies to receive, but I will read the affirmation. We pledge that we will faithfully and impartially use our skills, wisdom and judgment throughout the discussions and deliberations ahead of us today in order to make responsible and appropriate decisions for the benefit of Whanganui District at large. We commit individually and as council to the principles of integrity and respect, and to upholding the values that we believe distinguish and enrich our district. Councillors, in regard to today's agenda, is there any conflict of interest in this declaration? Thank you. And we are being live streamed and recorded. Thank you, Graham. Is there any urgent business? And just this is in regard to this afternoon, but you've all received the restricted circulation PE item. Thank you. That's great. So I am going to briskly get through the minutes so that we can get on to the order of today's agenda. So a quick page turn to the minutes of the 30th of June, page 4 and 5. Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm hoping that Councillor Carthy might help me out here. Top of page 5, in the reference to page 12, I do recall that it was Councillor Carthy who asked the question about whether the waivers had gone to other committees for consideration. But I think that it was me who noted that my intent in regards to that was to share the top-down process.
Yes.
Help me with that. Yeah, it's just not quite.
Okay, so just like your name recorded in there.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So page 4, 5, page 6 and 7. Thank you, Robert.
Page 6, second last paragraph. We're talking about the eroding costs were a significant change with potential increase. This moved eroding program. Then we're saying eroding reserve was used to offset the significant component of the increase. We need to just clarify that's a budget reserve rather than we sold a piece of land.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. We can actually have a bobbing play on that one, can we? Yeah. Okay, page 6 and 7. Page 8 and 9, just looking for corrections. 10, 11, 12, 13.
Councillor White's giving you a correction on page 12.
Okay, thank you. 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 21, 22, 23, and final page on 24. Is there any other corrections for those set of minutes? That being the case, someone with those minor corrections willing to move that we receive those minutes to an accurate record? Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, Brett. All in agreement to that, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, that's carried. Thank you. Just to rattle through those quickly again if there's matters arising. 7, 8 and 9.
I asked the question about on page 8 at the top about the funding shortfall, and I see the answer that it's given that there would be no cuts, service levels would be maintained. But I'm just trying to work out in my mind how we will maintain them when actually we haven't increased any of the funding. No cost escalations have been. I'm just wondering how we're still meeting service expectations.
So, the question was about service levels, not service expectations. We have written service levels and our intention is to maintain those service levels.
I'm
If the
asking how-
expectations over and above that, then probably we won't be able to do that.
I'm just trying to work out how, but we haven't got
I
money.
mean, I guess what you were asking is, you know, with increased costs and the budget remaining the same, are we going to meet our expectations and is, you know, and that obligation around that? I guess we're always in that uncertain world, aren't we, really, with cost increases?
So just note
Yeah.
again, the question was asked about service levels
I think that's,
and,
yeah.
and my understanding was we will continue to meet the
Yeah.
service levels that we have documented.
Yeah.
If people have expectations that are different to those service levels, then they're unlikely to be met.
So we're talking about two different things, but I think that, yeah.
They're all related.
And I think we have all, I mean, I'd like to think that we had a shared understanding of the challenges that we all face around that as well. Thank you. The only other thing I'd like to note on page is around the it's not specifically related to the minutes, but there is an extension to the submission period for a further 2 weeks through the 21st of August for the plan change 7. So that was following a conversation I had with Mr. Lee and Judith in her role following the public meeting to offer some grace to our community to provide an extension of time. So that has been notified in the North Canterbury News this week, I think it is, so another 2 weeks. Thank you, Robbie. Any other matters, all right?
Yes, it's on the same topic. If that submission time's pushed back, does it still leave us an opportunity or time to look at that feedback and perhaps make any further decisions before automatically going into allocating commissioners and such?
Well, I think the time frame for all of that would just need to be adjusted. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
So nothing will change in that timeline that was presented. It'll just have to be adjusted out. So, you know, it'll need to come to council to get a approved commissioner, and all those things still need to happen. So nothing changes as far as that goes, but I felt it was important that we so I'll move on from that. Any other matters arising on those pages in regard to that? I'm going to skip over a few pages unless you tell me otherwise. So page 14 or 15. No, nothing through matters arising. Right through to the end of that agenda. Any other matters arising in regard to those minutes, guys? Thank you. So that takes us to the second set of minutes, and this was for the temporary road closure, which Tom and Robbie sat on. So I'm guessing you've both had a wee look at those minutes to see if there is any corrections to be noted. Both of you happy?
Very accurate.
Happy that we accept those set of minutes to try and accurate record. I'll move it, Tom.
I wondered if Tom might have an update how it went.
Yeah, just very successful. Yeah, lovely movie, and lots of people around and everything, and you know, with all the kids around, it was lovely to have the road closed off to know that the kids were safe, the people were safe. It was nice. Yeah, it was good.
Excellent. So we're going to move in a second that we accept those set of minutes. All in agreement, that please say aye. And we've had a wee update, so thanks, Tom. Robbie. We will take us through to our known forward work program. I just see that, I don't think that's correct, 8:30 start, on the 4th of August. It's supposed to be there, isn't it? Not sure what that's.
Yes, we're starting early.
Oh, we're starting early that
Yes,
day.
because we already had
There we go.
scheduled presentations lined up.
Ah,
This
I
was-
do
this was
remember
really
that
an item.
Okay, right, okay, so it is, it is all correct, my apologies, okay, so,
Except now that it's not a decision.
no, yeah. Okay, so it's so I guess what that should really say is a council meeting that will be starting at 8:30 in the morning because of the fullness of the agenda, as opposed to,
Yes.
yeah. That's probably more accurate. All right, you're all happy with that, guys? Thank you. And we have the mayor's diary on page 28, 29.
Just ask a quick question.
Yep.
Yes, sorry. Just on page 29, the meeting with Jo Hessel, can I ask, please, did she touch on, or did you touch on her two queries, one regarding the current change of the playground equipment and also traffic calming measures in the village?
Not traffic calming measures, sorry. It was around the playground and the changes to the playground. I think there was a new calling. Was that one I had?
Not on the 15th.
Okay,
The
Yep.
one that I attended was last week.
yeah, beg your pardon. Okay, so I met with Jo on site because she wanted to show me where the changes had happened. And from that site meeting was a follow-up meeting from the committee that Pauline and the other three other advisory people sat round to look at how the playground had been adjusted and what are the options going forward around that.
But the traffic calming didn't mention that.
No,
Okay, so I'm presuming that that's just going to flow through to officers or something, because it was quite a detailed email that she sent with some backup data
right.
in relation to driver behaviour within that village.
Okay. No,
Okay.
it was all about the playground.
All right, thank
All
you.
about the configuration of the playground and the progress.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Murray. I see you met with Dion from ECAN, Dion Swigs.
Mhm.
Could we brief us a wee bit on what that was?
Oh, look, he was going through to Kaikoura, following the flood event. And he just phoned to, and I met him down at the Nor'Wester for a cup of coffee, really just as a conversation, I have a relationship with him, with the chair of ECAN. There was no fundamental discussion around anything of particular, but he was just travelling through our area. When he rang me and said he was coming through, I really wanted him to go and have a look in Hamner Springs at the River Road Reserve, but the timing didn't allow that to happen. So hence the quick cup of coffee on our way through. So no great feature to that discussion other than relationship. Yeah, but thanks for asking. That's cool. Dave, did you have a question?
We'll do it all flying later on. Just I see you back to Fonterra, so
Yeah,
just catch up with you later. So
yes, we've got they're coming back to full council as well. And that was really a conversation with Hamish and I around results and where things going. But we've offered. Yeah, so it's to just that loop again, but fantastic. Any other questions? Okay. And the working group, is there any movement on that, Tom or Brett? I don't know whether there's been any work done there. That's fine. Thank you. With that, is someone willing to move those three items that we've received of information? Thank you, Dave. Do I have a second? Thank you, Frank. All in agreement, please say aye. Okay, that motion is carried. Thank you. So our first decision item today is on page 31 of your agenda, and this is the transfer agreement between the Haranui District Council and the Kaikoura Haranui Water Services Limited. I note the significance is high, and I'm sure that you have all read the significant policy and would agree the high status of that. This is another piece to the jigsaw puzzle, I guess, Claire, that we've been diligently working through as we set up the company and enable the business to continue to prosper. So I am happy that you take us through that, perhaps about the points that will be valid or changed, and then we'll see if there's some questions.
Thank you very much. As you're aware, this has been a long expected document. We've had previous meetings and workshops about this. The first one was about the resource consent transfers. We've had workshops about the nature of the transfer agreement in general. And the latest workshop was about a draft of the document you have before you today, although there have been a number of changes since that workshop. So this is obviously no surprise that it's coming. This document is based on the DIA template, It's had a large number of changes from the DIA template provided for transfer agreements, however, for a number of reasons which are specific to our circumstances. The water organisation has not yet acceded to the LGFA, and as a result, it means that it's necessary to include provisions in there about vendor finance. There need to be 2 transfer agreements, one for this council and one for the Kaikoura Council. If either council decides not to proceed, then in that case, the other one is of no effect. So it's all or nothing. In terms of, we have had advice from Buddle Finley about this on more than one occasion, because there are a number of bits and bobs to it. And the advice has also been necessary most recently because we're now past 1 July. And so we've now worked into this, the fact that this takes effect from 1 July 26, which was the date we were always expecting it to take effect from. But it recognises that we are now further through July. So there are a couple of things that have had to change as a result of that. Now, a couple of very minor corrections, well, one's not quite so minor, but any reference in there to ordinary shares should be referring to Class B shares. And we'll make that change. We will also insert the name of this breaking contractor and we'll insert the name of one of the DCs which is no longer in existence. So the Class B shares is the one there that's the most significant. That's because the Class B shares are the consideration for the transfer of the net assets. And the Class B shares don't carry any voting rights, but they are the basis on which any distributions or liquidation of assets would occur, and therefore they are important. And they're based on evaluations. Now, I'd like to talk directly about the impacts of simplifying local government, because obviously at the time we started working on this document, simplifying local government wasn't on our radar. And now it is.
Yeah, and then I'll come to you first.
There are a number of provisions in the Local Government Water Services Act that provide for flexibility. It is anticipated that one of the sections I didn't refer to, of section 15, for those who are excited about sections, provides for in the event that certain things happen that a new transfer agreement is needed. And this includes in the event that it's decided to sell all the shares, bring it back in-house, liquidate the company. There are all sorts of provisions, things that might happen in some circumstances, which would then mean what would happen would be a new transfer agreement would be agreed. And that would need to be agreed with the water organisation, but it would also need to be consistent with the organisation's foundation documents. That's the constitution and the shareholders agreement. So it's not saying that once we do this that no changes are possible, but of course once we've done this, it does mean that we need to do it in accordance with the documents that we have. This might be my request if you would wish to ask. Councillor Carthy.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy for
Thank
that.
you. Yeah, no, thank you very much. Through the chair. I went through the transfer agreement document thoroughly over the last 48 hours and referencing it with the legislation and code. I just have a question, mainly for my own conscience, please. If we go to page 47, if it's possible. And I'm just reading and interpreting. I understand it, but I think it would be good for the room to understand this. Well, payment and purchase consideration, page 47, 4.2. Does the situation deplete or weaken our position because of the transferring of debt that we have put across to the organisation as a whole, being the council vote and our power within that voting position because of that?
Good question. The situation with regarding to I presume you're talking about the influence on the water organisation, the relative power of the two councils.
Correct, yes.
Okay. The voting rights are attached to the ordinary shares and the Class A shares. Now, there's currently one ordinary share per council, so Kaikoura's got one, Huronui's got one. And in terms of the Class A shares, at the request of Kaikoura, Kaikoura has 99 ordinary shares, and Huronui has 101 ordinary shares. There are no voting rights attached to the Class B shares, which is what this document's about.
So you're referring, these are Class B share considerations? Yes. That was just I need to clarify. But thank you. Oops.
Okay, I've got a few questions going, so I'll go down the line, Robbie, and then me, and then.
Yeah, recognising the massive amount of work that's gone into getting us to this point. I've got to ask, is it appropriate at this stage to even be progressing this further? And I'd like to know what the options are of perhaps leaving on the table, seeing the options, it could be put back a year. I'm just concerned that we're continuing down a path that may come to a dead end, and we may be putting more and more effort and money into something which through no fault of our own may potentially become defunct or not progress. We're valuing everything on book value in B shares, and the things that are divided up, I understand that's how it all comes back or not. Yeah, and there's unknowns around, should this not proceed, how is it all disbanded? And I know that there's a 12-month notice period, you know, if this is all locked in, I think if I'm reading right, 12-month notice period to start to unwind it. So I'd just like assurance or not that it's appropriate to continue past this point at this stage, or whether or not a pause might be wise to see that we don't get too far down a path that may come to a dead end.
This is a very minor clarification. Most of the assets and liabilities are based on book value, but the infrastructure assets are based on the market, on the replacement cost, depreciated replacement cost valuation, which will be determined by the value of WSP for both councils. Coming back to your question about the weighting, there is flexibility to unwind things, but you are correct that it would take more effort to unwind things once we go further down the track. Would that be an accurate description?
Yes, I think so. Just on that, I mean, I guess the council's intention was to set this up as a vehicle for delivering water services into the future. And that was Kaikoura's intention. There is nothing fatal about simplification of local government that would stop KHWS from delivering water services into the Puranui and Kaikoura areas as they stand into the future. You know, we've done this on the basis that it's going to deliver the best service for the people in this area, and that's the basis that we made the decision. So I see no reason to stop simply because that people are looking to have a jiggle of boundaries, particularly given that there is no particular certainty in that, and there is no legislation there. What we've got is a letter from ministers saying we want councils to reorganise. There is no legislation.
I guess I'd still be interested to know as what's the consequence of even waiting a month. You know, I just sort of feel that we're turning up to a wedding when the bride's not going to be there.
Can I supplement what I'm saying? Has there been any indication from the government about how they want the water organisations to proceed, bearing in mind that we are also got the simplifying local government on one hand, and these two maps or plans or agreements or whatever happens may not coincide when they overlap, and they may look pretty ugly actually. You know, sorry.
So, Madam Mayor, there is a fair bit of disjointedness about the actions that the government is taking. They are the government's actions, not ours. And we just have to try and figure out the best path through this if we can. I take heart that it's the same government that has proposed that we join together and form these water entities, and has passed the legislation to do that. It would seem rather capricious, I guess, to pass legislation which then actually undid that when we've done what they wanted us to do in the first place. So, so I think it's unlikely that they would legislate against it.
Can yeah, I've got a couple of questions, but I'll come back to you, Vincent. I'll go, Chris. Oh, no,
Through the chair, please, Madam Chair. The question then pens, I suppose this is a question to either Claire or to Hamish, the CEO. Be it that our relationship is with the Kaikoura district, with this entity, they then set themselves to go with, let's just say it rolls through to the Marlborough district. What will occur to the voting right at their end, going into the new entity, and what will happen to ours going into whatever entity we continue with?
The ownership of the shares will pass to the new entity.
That's a shame.
Thank you, Claire. Come back to you.
I'm just on the liabilities. I see it's all financial, but I'm just worried other liabilities we could have on consents, and even there seems to be a gap where this water services starts and ends with stormwater. I'm just trying to work out where the boundaries, because when the legislation was trails and pipes, but it seems to be like we've handed over more of it to them, or what? I'm just trying to find where, before all this happened, where actually is, because we could have big gaps in our infrastructure where it doesn't fit into, it's just left in a dead zone.
So largely, we've aligned it with where the capability sits. So where the capability is transferred to KHWS, then the consents have gone with that. So when KHWS accepts those consents, they would then accept the liability that goes with those consents that are transferred through.
So supplementary question, you're saying capability, so contracts that we've made with our community to do jobs is sort of being swapped over to this new water company. So who's, if things don't happen, who's responsible? Is it the council? Is it the new water authority? To me, I'm just trying to work out where it all fits together.
So ultimate accountability in that case rests with the directors that you appointed to that new entity. That's where accountability sits for those things. But of course, this is reliant on us having a close working relationship, and currently that is working really well. We are having a close working relationship. We're keeping in contact. Things are working, as we saw during the rain event. KHWS were out there doing what needed to be done. There was no need to instruct them to do that. They simply understood that this is where their responsibility fits, and they got on and did it.
I could already think of a couple of areas where we're falling down a bit, and I won't bring them up here, but there is a couple, and we haven't been going very long, and I'm feeling we're putting a lot of responsibility onto this company when they actually don't even know really what they're getting into. Do the directors realise, or even the CEO of this company, what they're taking on? Have they been said, look, and who, and how do they communicate to the community if they've been off doing jobs for the community? Where is accountability they have to the community? Because I don't think that answered that question. I'm just trying to get in my head where it all fits.
In terms of accountability, the directors are accountable to the shareholders, and the shareholders are the two councils. Now, we are encouraging them through the statement of expectations and other ways to have regard for the community, but ultimately it's for the company to decide how they will do that. There are limited circumstances in which they do need to engage with the community, but for the most part, their accountability is to the shareholders. In terms of directors having an understanding of the activities, there have been several briefing type activities. They've already had 4 meetings, board meetings, as well as workshops. They have had a whole day working together talking about strategy. They've had a briefing session with the managers. They're coming up to speed quickly. Are there going to be surprises? Well, in any new undertaking, there are always surprises, and but that's just the norm when starting something new. But we're doing everything possible to make sure that everything is going smoothly. And they have as a chief executive someone who has extensive experience in the water industry. So I feel confident that they've got a pretty fair idea of what's happening. In terms of the ability to predict for the future, we're all in the same boat there.
I think, if I may, as far as connections go, my diary somewhere there is an appointment to meet with Carl, the chair. And Graham, you might be able to help me here, but have we got scheduled a time when the board would come back to present? We got that planned. I think there was
Madam Mayor,
some
yes,
discussion.
The chair and CEO
Yeah.
are coming to report to council. This is the beginning of November meeting. We had a discussion around the
Yeah.
timing of the
Yes.
quarters.
Yeah.
So that's the first one, and then it'll follow on quarterly up.
So in response to Vince's question, that is an opportunity for input to the shareholder council like ourselves. And that's scheduled for inside of this year. And yeah, okay, I'll carry on. I think that I've got some questions. I think Chris Scarlett, you had a question, then Dave, and then Chris Carthy. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, just to clarify, it's the forward capital expenditure of that company, the assets and liabilities of that expenditure, will they be noted against the B shares of each council?
Yes, in terms of the, the company is currently at the request of the shareholders, keeping the finances for the two districts separately. That means at any point in time, it's knowing what the assets and liabilities in relation to each district happen to be. And therefore, the B shares are going to be reviewed on a regular basis as provided for in the constitution. Yep.
So I've got a few more questions. I need to come back to you, Robbie. Happy with that, Chris? I'll go to Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Circling right back to where Robbie started the discussion, I know they're independent companies, water companies, so it should simplifying local government shouldn't be such an issue. I actually think that maybe it is an opportunity, because I'm on record as thinking that the Kaikoura Huronui was too small, not going to do all the cost savings. So maybe if we are in North Canterbury or a central, a bigger one, it may start delivering some of the things that the independents could do. So my question is really is probably back to Robbie. What have we got to lose to wait a month to know where we're at? Because the opportunities may be that our independent water company may be bigger and it's independent and they deliver all these things. And I go back to what Claire said earlier, it's probably easier than trying to unwind something. So, hypothetically, Ashburton, we're in with Ashburton and Waimak, and all of a sudden we can have a new independent company. So the question is, again, is if we wait 6 weeks, is there some major problems in waiting 6 weeks to know where we might be heading? And then we might all join, we might have one bigger company, independent company. Why start doing something that then might make this job harder?
Thank you, Dave, for drawing that. But I just asked Hamish, do you want to offer some?
So the way you've structured your water company is that you've structured it in such a way to make it open for others to join on the same basis. So going ahead with this doesn't mean that you've locked other people out. It simply means that you're open to having others join. So there's no great detriment.
What if we want to join someone else?
Well,
they don't want to join us, we want to join someone else as well.
well, then you'll simply direct the directors that you would like them to explore a merger of organisations. Or you could tell them that you want to unwind the company and go somewhere else, but I think remember that we're ahead of most of the pack on this with our organisation. And I think having an organisation stood up and operating is a way better position to be in than somebody who's looking at spending several $1 million to set up their own organisation. Are they better to join your existing organisation, or are they better to spend several $1 million setting up their own? I mean, I know which position I'd rather be in.
So, thank you for the question you raised, Dave, and thank you for that response. So I've got Chris Carthy, and then Robbie, and Pauline, and then Chris Garland.
Chair, clear another one for you. Sorry to come back to the share. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Would you mind, Madam Mayor, if I just added one minor point to that?
No, go for your life.
Okay, sorry, I'll.
No, of course.
In terms of the impact of waiting, legally it doesn't change anything. The only thing it might make less certain is the situation in the event of a major event such as an AF Act, because the assets are still in the council's name, but we are not currently collecting, well, we're collecting rates, but the rates are going straight through to the water organisation. So, yes.
So we're partially, sorry, Madam Chair, if I may. So what you're saying is we're partially exposed at the moment if that event was to occur.
I'm not knowing that we are exposed, but I would need legal advice on that to be sure.
Yeah, I can assure you that we're probably a tad exposed. Okay. Madam Chair, through the chair, again, for you clear, I do keep beating up about these shares and the transfers and the ownerships and stuff, because at the end of the day, as we go forward with the government's pressure to do these things, these things will alter, and for my community. When I look at through the Act, I have clause 20 in the Act about general duty of retained ownership of infrastructures. Does our shares come under that? If it does, then we have to work outside of the legislation to allow those transfer of shares, be it that we merge with when we merge with somebody else. And as the CE's instructed, those shares will transfer out to the new entities. So my question to you or to the CE is that, are we duty bound under section 20, or is that only for physical infrastructure, or is it seen as, because it's termed asset, and my accountant will certainly look at my shareholdings as assets. So the question I'd like to know is, are we supposed to operate under that set of legislative, or are we able to work outside of it? I'm talking about shares of the company.
Right.
Transfer.
I think I'm not in a position to answer that question right this minute, but sure. I'm aware that we do have legislation that specifically provides for what it is that we're looking at doing.
Yes.
It also, possibly if I could sort of build on the share conversation, even though I'm not addressing your question directly, there is nothing to prevent a territorial authority owning shares in more than one water organisation. So if this is just the only other one that's going that's like this is Christchurch at the moment, so they're having a CCO. So if in the event that we went together with them, the new territorial authority could have shares in the Kaikoura Water Services and the other shareholders in the current CCO for Christchurch. Those things can coexist. Now, is it the most efficient way of running something? Probably not, but in terms of legally, there are a large number of options with that.
I'm looking at it as, through Chair, I'm looking at it as a legal entity purely because this is, well, if it ever arises, will be a legal argument. Yeah, and that's what I want to clarify, because my reasoning behind this, clear through the Chair again, is that the ownership of the shares and the bequeathment of all this asset across to the new entity, from our community standpoint, from the rates we've paid and played into, they consider it an ownership within their rate bound, which I understand. And so we'd lose control of those essentially with the voting rights once we're diminished through these simplification. And that's all. I'm just trying to clarify so I can address my people who bail me up at the Foursquare or at the petrol station and understand what we are and where we are exposed to what changes are occurring. That's why the question about the shares, because at the end of the day, when we move into a new entity, our voting rights could well be diminished around the table of that entity. And the people who set this up will be could be at a disadvantage. Not saying there will be, and that's the meaning and push behind why I'm asking these questions. And I appreciate the reply if you could look into it.
That question you've just answered there, that one's covered off in the constitution. So in terms of, let's say we join, another territorial authority decides it wants to join the Kaikoura Huronui Water Services. Okay, so it would need to, in accordance with the constitution and shareholders agreement, have a transfer agreement. It would get Class A shares and an ordinary share, one ordinary share, Class A shares as provided for in the constitution and shareholders agreement. In terms of would it dilute the decision-making authority, which is the key decision I think is underlying your inquiry?
True.
The answer is that many of the key decisions relating to the water organisation are referred to in Schedule 3 of the shareholders agreement, which sets out things you have to have either 100% shareholders agree on, or in some cases 75% agree on. So anything key, like a major outsourcing or another partner or all those sorts of things have to have all of the shareholders agree. So does that dilute ability to control things? The answer is it doesn't dilute the right of veto, but it, yeah. Does that make sense?
Through the chair, thank you for your response. It does. The issue will come down to, as you've just pointed out, just so I get it right, and I have read all the agreements, just I'm more for the room than anybody, but so if we have another entity come on board, say we merge with Council B, they then will get, that'll merge into a single entity. The shares will transfer into that entity as ownership. Therefore, that entity might have a voting right around the table that is more biased towards the new entity, be it a city or something of that nature. Around the table is more my concern at this end. Does that make sense? Because when it comes down to the votes, you're talking about the share, that's fine. That's retracted, that's held through the MOUs and the agreements. But the voting in the chamber, as we progress out, is my concern, and that's clear that I know it's probably something we can't control, but it's something I think everyone needs to be well aware of, that is a possibility more for the simplify than what we're doing. So my question's more a broader question, not directed mainly all over the water issue, but we need in this room to understand that as we look to our broader challenges outside of this room. Thank you.
This is a simplifying local government question, so I know.
I think it crosses onto them. Yes, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, I just think that if another partner was to join the entity, then they would have one vote as well, just like, you know, there's a Kaikoura vote, there's a Huronui vote. So in the shareholders.
So my
equality of voting. So this is the Class A, Class B share thing that we need to consider. The Class B shares, not voting shares. Class B are the asset shares. And just going back to clause 20, clause 20, the general duty to retain the ownership of the infrastructure, that falls on the water service provider. We're not the water service provider, KHWS is. So they're the ones that are bound by clause 20 to retain their infrastructure.
Does that not fall across to us though, as the shareholder?
No.
Okay. So then we are clear to do that. But through the chair, if I may respond, because I think I need to. Again, my point is that with the new entity, let's say we and Council C join together, we're now Council D.
Yeah.
Those shares transfer into Council D. Now, the voting around the table could be the people from this section only have 3 seats at the table, or 5, and they have 16. Now, the vote over our water is now in the hands of persons who don't, I'm just querying because as we go into the simplification, like, this has a bearing, and it's one that's very important. And it's just that's what I was trying to clarify, and I think you've given me what I needed, and I understand that as far as the water entity goes, and as far as the share split goes, nothing's changing too much. But around the vote in the new chamber, there will be a disparity, potentially a disparity. That's what I was clarifying.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the decision making around procurement or, you know, whatever that I think Chris is referring to, actually will be done around the board table as opposed to the council table of elected members. The MOU states that on, I think it's 6 monthly intervals, the board will present the progress or the updates to the board as that. So I think that's how I understand it, but I'm stand to be corrected.
Yeah, I'd like to go understand.
Yeah.
Councillor Carthy's statement, and I think I agree with him that I know it's a rare thing.
I know, it's
but what I think he's saying is that as shareholders sitting around the table, making those shareholder decisions, which might be to extract themselves from the entity or something like that, that will be made by the new entity and the representatives of that new entity, and there could be a difference of views. Remembering, of course, that everyone that's sitting around that table is acting in the interests of everybody that lives in the boundaries of that entity. So it's no longer the old lines. It's a new entity with representation that is representing the entire entity. Best interest of it.
Questions coming, I've got Robbie and Pauline and Chris Garland.
Yeah, I know in the summary, you know, Kaikoura District will enter a similar transfer agreement with us. I don't know if we know that, well, I've got no information on that, but we're in a environment where apart from Central Christchurch, they're the only other council, including us in our area, that decided to set up an independent WISCO. So now we're, through no fault of our own, in an environment where we're potentially going out to look to amalgamate with other councils that decided not to do that, and they've decided all to do their internal thing. So I don't know that we're in the strongest bargaining position there. I'm aware that the government have given us in my mind, an absolute hospital pass by doing this water process first, then the amalgamations. To me, I think if we ran that one again, you'd do it differently. So without the government as part of this process, now the amalgamation, perhaps introducing that, oh, by the way, when you amalgamate, we'd like you to have to separate your water out from any new council entity or something. Without some kind of directive like that, we really are we're heading to the unknown there. But and I just feel the race closing behind us. So for my part today, I would still urge that we leave this on the table, hit pause, and just deal with amalgamation first before we get further down to me, what may be a dead end.
Sorry, yeah.
So there is another Canterbury council, of course, that has set up a WISCO, and that is Selwyn, and currently Timaru, Mackenzie, and Waimati are busy setting up a WISCO as well. So yes, there are some councils in Canterbury that aren't covered by WISCOs, and there's some that are. I think if we look at what the government has told us they're going to do with the Head Start program, is they're going to introduce bespoke legislation for the Head Start councils. And I would think if retaining the WISCO and delivering services was really important to you, then you might ask the Crown to include that in the bespoke legislation.
I understand all that, but I think we've got enough right at this point now. I think we're trying to make this decision before we've got all the cards in front of us, and I think that if there's nothing to be lost by just having a cup of tea and waiting a bit longer, that would be my preference.
I guess the challenge around waiting for that point, we'll understand the program of time framing. The government have said you'll get the tip here in this application sometime in September. So if you were thinking a month, probably we're still going to be shy on knowing whether we collective Canterbury, we Uranui, inside a simplification process to move forward. So timing's.
So for supplementary, perhaps suggest that we do put the cart and horse in the right order and perhaps wait after that.
So just noting, Madam Mayor, that if that Head Start proposal is not accepted, we're in the backstop process.
Yeah.
So you're looking to hold this off till 2021.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to inspire confidence in our partners in Kaikoura by saying, no, we're not going to go ahead with this. Kaikoura is looking at the same process next week, I think, Claire, is it? Yeah, be confirmed, but they're looking at the same process of transferring their assets in. Suddenly, if we haven't transferred our assets in, and then Kaikoura is saying, well, what's going on? Which they would rightly question, then all of a sudden the whole future of or the rationale for setting up Wisco starts to fall apart.
I mean, I think it's fair that we have to state that we have confidence in the water services that the company we've set up and the intent for that. But I guess, you know, we're just stuck in this horrible time frame where we've got such a significant decision of another matter that will, shift the dial a tad. So I have confidence in the company, but it's just the timing of the other reform process that's challenging to everybody. Claire, and then I'll come back to you, Dave. I've got Pauline and Chris Scarlett first.
If this is postponed for more than a minor period, then one might be looking at a contract, because currently we've got the organisation is actually providing water services and has the staff, and is doing so on brace and favour basis pretty much at the moment. And one might like to, if it was going to be more than minor, to look at tightening that up a bit.
Okay. Pauline, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. Commenting a question really. I mean, when I was making decisions in the best interest of the constituents, I agreed to enter into this with the best intent, believing that it was the best thing for Haranui at the time, although I did doubt the scales of autonomy that would be granted. And I had full confidence in the appointment process of us appointing our directors, which was really, really important for me, because it was the board are accountable to us as shareholders. I am concerned that future appointments and decision making will be diluted, potentially if simplifying local government moves ahead in whatever form. That wasn't something that was at all in my head when this decision making was done. I am concerned about the distance from assets that the decision making, could take. I guess what I'm really interested in is the other options considered. So option 5 there, the council could decide to defer the transfer to another date. Now I understand everything that Hamish has said about, us wanting to certainly be demonstrative to Kaikoura that we have confidence in this arrangement, which I did until simplifying local government. But you've mentioned, Claire, that one of the risk exposures is potentially the like some sort of major disaster of some sort. What other, and I'm probably putting you right, on the spot here, but what are the other pros and cons for considering option 5, which is really where the room's going? That comes right back to Robbie's question. Is there, or Hamish, are there other other things other than that risk exposure, and of course, a potential sending a message that we need to be aware of in this decision making. And I know I'm putting you on the spot because you probably weren't expecting the discussion to take this tact.
There are a large number of factors to consider. A relatively minor one, but not completely insignificant, is that the DIA and the Commerce Commission are expecting this to progress, and we would just need to cover that off with them as to what the arrangements were going to be, because we do need to report to them on a regular basis as to what we're doing in terms of implementing the water services delivery plan. But there's nothing that means that we can't, that doesn't preclude us doing anything else. I'm just noting that in the background. For a pure mechanical fact, if it were decided to have a transfer date effective any other date other than 1 July, then we need to think about the financial implications for Jason and his team. But there is nothing at the moment. We've got a proposed agreement that is actually effectively backdated to 1 July. So whether or not that's, the longer you go, then whether that's still viable is something else to consider. If it's a long time, that might not be. In terms of insurance arrangements, we have put the insurance arrangements back in place so that the council is covered for the physical damage to any physical water infrastructure assets.
So that would counter the risk exposure of some sort of disaster.
Yes, to some extent. Obviously that we would need a more in-depth analysis in order to work out precisely whether there's any residual risk. I'm just noting that there are things that happen that can surprise us. Anything you'd like to?
I just elaborate on the insurance. The above ground insurance is covered by a material damage policy, which and that was very much a timing issue. And policy needed to be renewed at 4 o'clock on the 30th of June, which we did in the name of council. So all of the above ground related water set as part of that policy. The intention was the high charge the water at appropriate stage. The underground assets are covered by our membership of local government, local authority protection program, and we have the intention was obviously that the assets will transfer on the 1st of July, and the company will then take responsibility for the contribution to LAP to cover that. I've informed LAP that the likelihood is that we won't have the transfer agreement in place until the 1st of September, so they have made sure that the council is still, both councils are still responsible or still covered by LAP up until that point. But as if it needs to be extended further, we can be informing LAP of that case. That is just purely who is the party that they need to be dealing with.
Okay, so we've got DIA expectations, financial implications, viability of backdating, insurance arrangements. Anything else, pro or con?
Through Madam Mayor. Yeah, I think there's a real practical issue in here, in that we've got the water company working on our assets and utilising our consents. But the control of that sits with the directors of the water company, not with the council. So there's a governance disconnect here, and there is potential for things to go wrong in this disconnect space. I'm relatively uncomfortable about that disconnect, but comfortable that we have a good work relationship, good work relationships change. So my view is, I mean, this is the undertaking, this is the requirement of the Act that we transfer the assets through. That's the path we're going down. To stop now is going to leave us exposed in that regard. what I would then be suggesting is that we immediately put a contract for services to the water company saying, you're working on our assets, this is our expectations of how that's going to work. So that they'd have some certainty of how they're working and how they're getting paid, because at the moment, the rates that are being collected include the asset stuff as well. And that's all being handed through to the water company. But what we're effectively asking them to do is to ignore the assets, ignore the future planning of the assets for the meantime, and just be a contractor for services, essentially. So it's a different gig, and they might say yes, no, whatever. So, but there's a risk inherent in this, and you know, I've been okay with, yeah, we'll just work on a relationship basis for a few weeks until we get this over the line. And it's been a very difficult document to get to this stage, and it still hasn't been accepted by the water services company either, so they need to accept it as well. So I do think delaying has some knock-on consequences, particularly an indefinite delay. Delaying for a week, I'd be like, yeah, okay, we can work with that. But if I haven't got, this is where we're getting to, then there's some other things that I'm going to want to put in place to protect you as the governors of this. The transfer was to transfer those assets, liabilities and responsibilities through to the company. If you're not doing that, then we're playing a different game.
I mean, I think we all recognise that the challenge of time in this regard, and I think that's the respect of the questions that I've heard around the table today. That it's not around the integrity or the deliverability of the company. It's just that we've been stuck in this awkward position of uncertainty as a district going forward. And the reality that we know after 2028, we will be in a different space. So, you know, this is the timing around this is really awkward, and that's what's raised concern and rightful questions around the table. It's not about the integrity of the company in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, the staff also shared this awkward change
Yeah,
process
100%.
with you.
Yeah.
We have given the staff some certainty by transferring them through to the organisation. However, this just will increase the uncertainty, and they are feeling the uncertainty of local government simplification as well. But that's, I mean, we share that.
Yeah, I know, and you know, I'm incredibly mindful and respectful of the questions and the integrity of the questions. It is about getting, you know, just giving a sense of comfort to our collective futures, really. So, you know, this is it's not an easy time for any one of us. I think. Yeah, okay, then I'll give you.
Thanks. Thank you for that, Hamish. I've made quite a list there, and I understand everything you've said. So everything that you have said focuses on, I guess, the risks or the concerns around a delay. Are you able to outline any pros for delaying? So I'm asking you to think on the other side of the coin now.
Yep, the pros for delaying is many of you have voiced, you will have some certainty about the future through the simplification process. You will likely get that in 2027 sometime. Scheduled ministerial announcements in September, but remembering that Head Start is a process, and the 9th of August is basically putting an application in. The September decision by the minister is an indication that you can start work in earnest on that, and it won't be until, I would say, later in 2027 that you'll actually start to see how that's rolled out.
A few other people wanting questions, but can I just ask a question? in respect of what I've just heard. So if we were of the mind to consider the transfer as per today's agenda, it'll go to Kaikoura the next week or whatever. Then it will go to the board to consider the intent of the transfer agreement, and they will seek and lead their own legal opinion around that and either agree to the process as written or may come back with a schedule change or a clause change in schedule X. So final sign off of this could take, I'm just trying to get so that just in the value of people's questioning, the sequencing of this would come to final sign off maybe. I mean, the board met on Monday is my understanding. So they'll have another meeting in a month's time when this paper would be presented to them, either acceptance or it would come back with a clause change potentially, maybe. Is that right?
My understanding is that we would share it with the board at an early stage so they could seek legal advice prior to their meeting.
Right.
Because obviously that will take some time.
Yeah, so, but I guess in a timing sequence, it would go to their board meeting in end of August. At the earliest, even with a pre-read of that, for a legal opinion. And then it would come back to us as a final signed off document once the clause changes have been managed or identified or whatever. You know, I'm just saying, do we give another chance? That's what I'm thinking.
It's a good question. The expectation in the resolutions would be if the changes were minor, that they would be delegated to the chief executive of the Kaikoura district councils to approve. There would need to be both of them. In terms of if it's more significant than that, it would need to come back to council.
So if the board raised an issue at the August meeting that was greater than significant and couldn't be signed off under delegation, it would come back to this council. Just trying to get timing to manage some of the queries or questions that have coming. I do have a few more questions coming, and I'm incredibly conscious of time as well. Chris Scarlett, Dave, Brett, Tom, Robbie and Steve, thank you.
Thank
Your
you.
name's up, that's good.
Just got a couple of questions or questions, I guess, more than comments. To delay transferring the assets, I mean, we've set up this water services company to manage and run those assets. We don't actually transfer those assets into that company. Where does that leave that company? To me, is a big issue. To delay adding those assets on the grounds of local government reforms. I just have a bit of clarity around some of those timeframes, because as you say, we've got to put this proposal in on the 7th of August. But as far as actual any clarity around how those new councils or unitarian authority are going to look, as far as having lines drawn on a map, is that likely to be seen this side of an election, or is it likely to be changed after the election? So I mean, to wait, what I'm sort of saying is to wait a month or 6 weeks, we're not really going to know any more than what we actually know now. And then to set up that unitarian authority is not going to happen to 2019 or 28. Yeah, sorry. That's all mixed up here. Yeah, so 28, so it's at least a couple of years. By the time those authorities are set up, there's going to be a number of things to deal with. And as you say, water's going to be sort of sorted, so it's not going to be necessarily a top priority when those are set up. So this water authority at best is going to be operating for possibly at least the next 5 years before changes are made to it. So we need that structure in place. So what I'm sort of saying is if we're holding off putting our assets into that, really we're going to be putting them off for at least 5 years, which leaves the water services company Yes, exactly. So I don't see any delay in putting those assets in, sorry, on that basis.
Right, look, I think, Chris, it's good to, we've had to explore these things to be certain and confident. And, but I really appreciate your thinking around that as well. Dave, got a question?
Yeah, I circled right back and thought about it and thought that it's probably, we should just get on and transfer them in. And probably our biggest risk we've got is Kaikoura next week of deciding whether they would be transferring them in. So the question is, because they went with Marlborough, they'll be having a whole lot more discussions about whether they should or not. And then what Chris has said, an election cycle, this simplification might be delayed or I don't know what's going to happen. So I come back to it's an independent company. And I'm an impatient person and go around circles.
Good, that's great. Thanks, Dave. Really appreciate your thinking around that one. Brett? Oh, Claire, do you want to say something? Sorry.
Councillor Scarr asked a question that we haven't fully addressed. The question you asked was, what was the situation of the company in the event that the assets didn't go across? The answer to that question is that the company exists. It has been delegated a task and it has staff and directors and it is carrying out that task. It's likely that there would be this need for a service contract. But for example, we do have for roading, we have Cord provides roading services, but we own the roading assets. That is technically possible.
There is a fundamental difference in this case because the company would not be a water services CCO, it would be just a standard CCO. So there's some changes that we have to make in that regard as well, because they would not be a water services CCO. They don't transfer the assets through.
Brett.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, just sort of trying to take in what everybody's talking about. If I could go to page 33 and last I just really, I guess, question and look at this clarification. I see that the accession that was lodged with the LGFA was declined in 16 July, which I don't think is any surprise, and I'm assuming that relates to what would currently look like a water sheet, and that reapplying, and it says possibly within 3 months it'll look differently. I don't think it's going to look that differently in 3 months, but I guess my question relates to, we are currently servicing debt, providing funding. And if I flip to Kaikoura having conversations with Marlborough and Marlborough do want to become involved, how long does our exposure, if you like, to funding carry on for? Because it doesn't actually seem to be any end date in that. Could our exposure expand beyond what it currently is?
Jason's nodding.
Yeah, I believe so, because one of the benefits of joining with the fact that they at that point had no debt, and it was sort of they're able to extend the revenue that we've got that Kaikoura are providing to bolster the funds from operation to meet the requirements of the LGFA within currently for 7 years. I think it would be a struggle for us to prove to meet the LGFA requirements by ourselves without significantly increasing revenue.
And then I'll go to you, Tom.
In addition, if the assets do not transfer to the Kaikoura Renewable Water Services, then obviously it cannot accede to the LGFA.
Yeah, a few minutes back, Mari, you mentioned that we have to maintain our integrity in this situation. Do you not feel that perhaps the integrity of Kaikoura has been questioned by them, going full headlong into this with us, and then very, very early in the day, as far as simplifying local government, they actually ruled out working with us? Has not the integrity of the whole process been damaged by Kaikoura's decision? Secondly, if a larger organisation or a larger council were to amalgamate with us and would therefore take control of our assets, have we not sold our voters down the line a little bit because they were the ones who wanted to retain control? You know, one of the big voices was that they wanted to retain control of local water. And in a future arrangement, it could be that Puranui was a minority in the new organisation. And I know it's a new organisation, so we're no longer a minority because we're not actually considered to be a minority because we wouldn't be independent in that situation, but we would be passing over control to that new authority who would naturally have an advantage. And lastly, very, very lastly, Hamish, you used the word that you were protecting councillors. I wondered what you meant by protecting councillors. If they were your specific words that you were protecting councillors, and what are you protecting us from? Are we?
What was the context of that?
It was over the transfer of these assets to the Water Authority.
While you're thinking about that, I'll try and answer the question around the process of entering into the Water Services CCO with Kaikoura. We were, as a council, we were in a different stage at that stage. We went in a good faith to that process, knowing that that was a well-considered, consulted process. I don't think anybody sitting around this room or anybody in our community envisaged the application of local government that has subsequently come and placed us in this position. So I do not think, and I probably reject the context that we have lost faith in that negotiation or that position. And in fact, if we look at our future, whatever our future will be with whomever our future will be with, there is an opportunity to negotiate to enhance what we know, excuse me, of the Kaikoura Puranui Water Services. This could be a lever that we could consider in our negotiations, and that's something that I have put on the table, and I've told you all about that all the way along. I admit maybe, Tom, you weren't in part of those conversations, but I've always spoken about water as being an important part of any negotiation that we have with our neighbours or whomever. So that's where that sits. I think we're at a age and stage without anticipating this.
Okay, so Hamish, so could I'll reword the question, maybe you put it on.
No, I'm really interested in the question and the implication that I am somehow protecting councillors. I don't recall saying that I was protecting councillors, but I am looking out for liabilities for that council and staff. But I mean, you know, part of my role as your chief executive is to look where there is risk and liability and say, what can we do about that? I don't recall using the words that I am protecting you, but
could we check the minutes?
Yeah, we will. Yeah, we'll check the recording by all means. So I mean, Grant, not recording verbatim minutes, but I can go back and check the recording and just understand the context of.
Yeah. Well, turning the question around the other way then, if we don't make a decision today, if we deferred the decision, is there any liability on councillors for deferring that decision? Is there any legal liability on councillors? Is there any financial liability on councillors for deferring that decision today or not taking a decision today?
If you're referring to personal liability, no. If you're referring to our joint liability, then we will continue to carry the liability for the water services as an organisation. We carry that liability, and we're in the position where we have a water services company that isn't actually a water services company. It'll be a CCO working on our water services, not contracted to do so. So we've got some potential liabilities there that would have to be. At the moment, we're working on a goodwill basis, but that cannot carry on for an indefinite period. We need to put some protection in there. And it's not me protecting you, it's the organisation, some protection for this organisation, because we are potentially exposing ourselves to risk and liability. Remember, the delivery of water is a really serious business, and we've seen cases where it's gone wrong, and when it goes wrong, it's pretty spectacularly wrong.
I think the next report on drinking water highlights some of those issues as well.
I think a couple would add that we would all be thinking about was actually protecting our staff in that process. You know, we have worked through, and I'm drawing on Chris and Dave's recent comments that we need to be thinking about the full picture here. I know we're in a good time, but we need to make sure that we have, you know, full regard to everybody that's involved in this process. And so,
Murray, could I just make a comment about Kaikoura as well? So all my engagement with Kaikoura, they've shown absolute good faith in all my dealings with them. They've been very straightforward on this. They want to join this water entity. They want to carry on, is my understanding. Obviously, you know, they have to pass this same test that we're testing ourselves on, but and their dealings with us, simplification, we're on the basis that potentially they could go north, potentially they could go south. So they've always been very upfront with us. I feel, you know, they have to make a decision about what's best for their district, just like we do. They've made their decision. They've been very clear about that. They did consider the water entity in their decision-making process, but believe it's still the way forward. So, you know, I don't feel that there's anything there that we need to have any concern about.
okay, I've got three questions in the pipeline, Robbie and Steve, and then Fiona. And at that point, I'm going to ask your readiness to make a decision on this. Other than that, I will go to morning tea, and I will ask that you come back with that decision after morning tea. So have we think about that as we get these last three questions out of the road, Robbie?
Yeah, I have absolute confidence in the governance and the management and the WISCO that we set up. But, you know, I don't think we could do any better. And nothing would please me more than if in the further developments along the next way that was picked up and expanded or used, because I don't think you could form a better one. But the councils around us that we're most likely to be amalgamating with or whatever have thought differently. So that's my concern there. Hamish has partially answered my next question was around the Kaikoura Council will enter into similar transfer agreements. I feel we're operating in silos a wee bit. They must have been sitting around the table just as we are having these discussions. They've decided to head north. I almost feel that it would be nice that if they could perhaps have given us a fairly good heads up, because I think at the moment we could be led along, and then days after we make our decision, they do something different. So I'm looking at the officer's recommendation there, and something that Claire said about the process of we go through this and it goes to the board and it does different processes, and then there's a final tick off down the track. And I'm wondering, you know, I'm not a lawyer, but if we agree to enter into transfer agreement, is that sort of similar to initiate? And when it comes down the track is there an actual signing off confirmation of this? So is there a potential to give ourselves a couple of months or month or two during that process, in case, and to see where these other apples fall, and just so that we're in a much better position to say, right, we know exactly what the landscape looks like now, we'll sign that.
Good question. The resolutions as currently written did not anticipate that process. They were indicating that if Kaikoura entered into the agreement also and for their organisation, and that if the board were to accept the proposed transfer agreement, then the agreement would be binding. However, it was anticipated that process might not pan out like that, and therefore it was proposed that the chief executive would have ability to make minor changes. Now, I think and minor changes means different things to different people, but this council has been in the habit of passing those types of resolutions in the context of things like the annual plan and the long-term plan in the past. So I believe there is an established precedent for that. So that wasn't anticipated in the resolutions, but that doesn't mean to say the council couldn't pass different resolutions.
And I acknowledge that this is a really significant thing to do, to transfer the assets to a new entity. So so you may wish this to come back to council after the feedback that you received from the KHWS board, so you can consider that as well, and then actually authorise the signing at that point.
That would enable us to move forward and give, and just not bide time, but actually just give some just validate the time frame that we're in at the moment, and I think that's what I'm hearing. So maybe that might be a consideration. Steve and then Fiona, and then what I think I'm going to do is break for morning tea, give you all a breather, and then when I come back, I'd like a decision. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And through the chair, I think it's very, very clear to everybody around the table here that the rug has been pulled from beneath our feet by the simplifying government process. And we find ourselves, I think, in a position where we are stuck somewhere between the whirlpool of Charybdis and the monster of Scylla. And whatever way we go, the what ifs and all the rest of it will always be thrown back at us. We have a duty to the people that have transferred from Hurunui District Council into this new entity. We have a responsibility to those people as well as to our elected members, because those people happen to be our elected members as well, our constituents. So I think that we need to take a look at what we are today. And today we are Hurunui District Council, and we're making a decision based on Hurunui District Council conversations around this table, around the water services, and we need to give the water services team the best opportunity to show a model that when we move into this new unitary authority, whatever that looks like, actually can be something that we can stand and say, look, this is what we've done with water services for what used to be the Hurunui District. It's now called something else. And this is a great model for whoever we get in bed with to buy into as well. So I think that I'm inclined to agree with Chris that we need to just get on with this now. We need to make the decisions based on the day today. We've got a very good eye on the future in terms of where things could go wrong and the what ifs and all the rest of it. Some of the risks have been questioned and some of the risk mitigations have been put in place around the actual assets, etc., etc. So I guess none of this is ideal. We're in a crappy situation, but today we're Hurunui District Council. We've gone through this. We've set up this company. We've got good people on board to run it. We need to empower them to run it, because they could be running it for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years before we end up smashed together in a unitary authority. So we need to make that decision for today for the people that elected us here to do that. And I think that if we give them 3 years of great water service, then it has to change. then we have to look at that and pivot when we get to that point. But we need to focus on what we're doing today. Observation rather than a question based on the great feedback from some of these councillors around the table.
Thank you, Steve. Final comment, Fiona, for question.
Oh, look, I think it's been a great conversation and questioning, because they are very uncertain times. And we don't know what the shape of things will be. But one of the things that we do know, in order to deliver any cost savings, is with the work that needs to be done in water moving forward, and the expectations that need to be met by the DIA and all of that type of thing, we will need an economy of scale. And taking some time to sort that before we move in, so that everybody's got a good understanding, the likelihood that we will have, as I don't know, unless there's a business model that we could set ourselves up as the old Hurunui that kept a more direct control of our assets, if that's what we feel is important. I'm not sure, and there's people smarter than me who know how to set up a system that allows us to do that when we've brought a whole lot of other people in that want the same say over their assets. I'm not sure how that works. But we've got, when you reading the Taumata ROI information that came through to us on their measurements for the first 3 years, and the type of work that they expect to be done going forward on surety of water supply, where we take it from, all of those sorts of things, that's a lot of work over a smaller base of people paying for it. So we definitely need some economy of scale. I'm not opposed to taking a bit of a pause while we understand a bit more, but I think having water delivered to you that is, it's not going to get cheaper. But maybe we can slow down how expensive it is with an economy, how much the expense grows over a wider group of people. I don't want to delay it for too long. I think I've had the same thoughts that have been expressed around this table flying around in my head too. What does it mean? How does it change it with simplification? But I'm not entirely sure how much influence we will still have, and when we get more economy of scale.
Okay, thank you. What I propose to do now, I think you are ready and to consider a recommendation, but I think that what I'm going to do is pause for morning tea, probably 10 minutes. So it's 10:45. I do expect you back in the room at 10:55, and we will look at the recommendation and move this forward. Okay, thank you. We'll adjourn. councillors. We are still on the first decision item of today in regard to the transfer agreement. And I don't step back from the fact that we've taken some time to explore the questions, identify the concerns, but actually consider the process that we're in and the volatile process, I guess, around, you know, the raft of government reform that we are faced with at the moment. And that all coupled together has made it, you know, a challenging process for us. But as I've said prior, you know, I have every confidence in the reason and our purpose of setting up our company. And this is another step in that process. So I think before we broke for morning tea, we were getting close to looking at considering the resolution on page 31 in your agenda, which would consider agreeing to enter into a transfer agreement with the Kaikoura Haranui Water Services Limited. But I wondered whether with that, if someone was willing to move, that we look at authorising the chief executive officer to bring that back, final document back to council, just for your comfort and confidence around that process. So if there is no further questions, what I'm seeking.
Just one question, just on page 69, just the global consent, transferring the whole global consent over discharged stormwater and construction phase, stormwater to land and to water is for the whole district. I was just wondering, how does that affect roading and everything else? If you it's taking the whole consent. That's what the question is.
How does it affect what?
Sorry?
How does it affect what?
It's on 69, it's 28. Yes, sorry.
So the discharging of stormwater is what you're concerned about?
Yeah,
Is that what you're
stormwater.
asking? So what are your concerns?
Well, that's what I'm saying is you know, it's not only this company that'll use that consent, how does Roding get on when they do a drain or do something to divert stormwater? That's all in sort of global consent.
The statute defines stormwater as not including stormwater relating to transport, the transport corridor. In terms of this agreement, it has provisions in it that neither side will deliberately do things that make things difficult for the other one in terms of the stormwater. That's an oversimplification, but that's more or less what it means. So in terms of the global consent transferring, this is primarily about stormwater not relating to roads, but of course, stormwater that's on roads does feed in into that. It's a single consent rather than two consents, and it's in line with the expectation of that statute.
Okay, so I will come back to the recommendation, having considered all of the questions that have been raised. And is there a mind to move forward with the transfer agreement, given the context of the discussion and the responses that we have received both from Claire and Hamish in this regard? So I'm in your hands, councillors. Thank you. Yep, and are you looking, Chris, just to clarify, sorry Robbie, I'm not sure, that we would authorise the chief executive to bring the agreement back to councillor and the board? Is that what you're saying?
I'm happy to wait.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you. So I do have a mover for that. I'm just going to pause that for a moment because I'm just not sure what Robbie's got a question or what's happening.
Oh, I think
you're happy to see that.
have you clarified that that's to come back once it's been to the board?
Correct.
I would be more comfortable with that, and that I'm uncomfortable with the amount of moving parts right now, and I would be more comfortable with that situation if we,
Okay, so I'm just going to come back to the mover, Chris, that number one is as written, but number two is the mover that you're happy in that recommendation to authorise the chief executive officer to bring the agreement back to council, but then to the board. That's the intent. That might be a bit clumsy in wording, but I think that's.
Madam Mayor, I think that is really clumsy. You don't need to authorise me to do that.
Yeah.
I think you simply strike out part two there.
Yeah.
Which,
Right.
in which case it forces it to come back
to
to
come back,
the
okay.
council to approve any minor amendments.
Okay, look, if that simplifies it, sorry, I see your hand up, but I'll come back to you. I just need to get the clarity from the mover so that we strike out number two. Are you comfortable with that as the mover?
That's right, yeah.
Yep. And I'm just going to clarify, Robbie, you're happy with that as a seconder to that motion?
I am, but I need to clarify this minor amendment. Would that include rejecting it if information at the time led to that decision?
Nobody will come back regardless.
That doesn't give us an opportunity at that point, which might be a month or two down the track. You know, we've got more information in front of us. Should it arise to change it, to not proceed?
I think it would require a seismic shift. This is going to the board as a genuine.
Transfer.
And so if there was a seismic shift, then potentially you would have, legal status to do that. But essentially you are agreeing to enter into the transfer agreement, noting that the board might require minor amendments. If the board required some really major amendments, then you would have the ability to say no. But as far as the conditions we're working in, I mean, if there was a seismic shift in those conditions, then you would have legal grounds to say no. But you are actually agreeing to enter into a transfer agreement. That's literally what it says.
So potentially, if one party, the other party wasn't to proceed with this, that would be a seismic shift.
So if Kaikoura doesn't agree, then this whole thing's null and void. It requires us both to do that.
Parallel. Okay, so we've got clarity on the mover and the seconder. Robbie, are you still happy with that position?
I'm happy as long as I've still got that option down the track.
Okay, I'll take that. Pauline, if you've got a question or comment.
Well, a comment really. So, thanks for that clarity. So to vote in favour of this, means that we are agreeing to this agreement unless there's a major change. I don't know that that represents the discussion that's been happening around the table.
So if the council chooses not to enter into this agreement, what they're entering into is some sort of negotiation with the board.
And the contract proceeds.
And that's a different ballgame once again. You either agree to enter into this agreement or you don't.
Is there?
With all due respect, I think that there's a middle ground there, and I think that middle ground is what I've heard from some councillors is that we're not necessarily agreeing or not agreeing, but rather wanting to take some time. I may have read the room wrong. That's right.
So I think the time allocation was that this agreement would go to the board would consider it, and then it would come back after the board meeting.
Only.
That's the time.
Only if there was some sort of fairly large change to the agreement.
It has to come back to the council to authorise the signing of the agreement. You haven't authorised anybody to sign it.
But isn't it coming back, sorry, that's a procedural matter. We would be voting to go forward now, it's simply procedure when it comes back.
Correct.
Okay, have we got clarity?
Could I just clarify one other thing? If we put this as it stands to the vote and it is lost, does that make it more are they still, is it still able to put something forward, the likes of which Pauline is talking about? Where it's a pause as opposed, and we're not doing anything. I'm not quite sure what they're suggesting on that one. Does that preclude the other conversation being put forward as a motion, or is it too close? It's not very clear, the question.
I don't think they conflict, Graham, do you? So what you're being asked is to enter into an agreement. If that fails, then somebody can say, okay, this is actually what we want to do. So long as it's not entering into an agreement, then you're not in direct conflict.
I think the particular officer mentioned that it'd be a negotiation process, so we could enter into a negotiation.
So that would be different than going here. Thank you, it's good clarification.
So as it stands at the moment, if the recommendation is successful, we would agree to transfer. The board would then consider, Kaikoura would consider, it would go to the board, and then a final agreement would come back to council. Is that what I've heard?
Yes.
Into this?
Well,
Yep.
you'd
And
have-
but
you'd
it
have
would
to-
be the.
You'd have to,
the wholesale.
you'd have to appoint someone to negotiate, give them some terms to negotiate on, which wouldn't be this agreement, it would be presumably something else
Something
that
different,
you'd be looking for them to negotiate on. And then they'd go away and conduct the negotiation, and if I was the person doing the negotiation, I'd want authority to sign off on the agreement that was reached, because there's no point, you cannot really in good faith conduct a negotiation if you don't have authority to sign off on it. So you're creating another circle.
Robbie?
Yeah, what we're saying that for him too, but I'm just weary of getting, I feel like I'm being looked. Princess race scenarios, I'm being led up a path that I'm not really comfortable going, and I'm not sure if it finishes just around the corner. In 5 minutes' time, I'll know whether or not Kaikoura is in or out. I'll know whether or not the our amalgamation, what's our preferred option, what the other big players are saying, and whether or not they say, well, we'd probably go that way or we won't. And I'm just concerned, really it is just like, can we just put it on the table and look at it next month? I just think at the moment I'm not comfortable with this scenario that we've been put to us. I don't feel that it's for me a really sound decision made with everything. I just don't feel the foundation's right. And so if we can't, I agree with, and I'm prepared to redact or pull back on the second, if it means that we don't have a final decision point down the track.
How does that work?
I think you need to, we're getting statements for it again. I think what you need to do is call for a seconder. If it fails for lack of a seconder,
We've got a seconder.
then Robbie seconded it.
Yeah, but
That's fine.
Okay, so then it's just arguments for and against,
Yeah.
so that's fine.
Okay.
To remove it now, it needs a resolution of the council to remove.
Yeah, okay.
that motion.
Okay, so we're getting really technical here, guys. So
Yeah.
Robbie, you have seconded that motion. So I will now call for debate and for councillors to speak in favour or against the motion as we understand.
Do I have an option to save that whole process of removing the second?
It would have to be a motion of council, as Graham just said.
Yes, Madam Mayor, once it's a motion's moved and seconded, then the only way to remove it is by council resolution.
Right.
So it's effectively on the table, and it no longer belongs to the moved and seconded, it now belongs to the council.
Then if we're only speaking for and against, as weird as it's going to sound that I've seconded it, if my understanding is now that if it comes back, it's just a rubber stamp, and no matter what new information we've got at the time, we're still bound. I wouldn't be confident with that. If I thought there might be another motion coming that said, let's just have another month or something, that would get my support more. That's a weird scenario, but there is.
Okay. Anybody else want to speak for or against the motion as it stands? Thank you, Brett.
I'm tending to speak for, simply because this board organisation was set up with the view of ultimately combining with larger authorities anyway at some future point. So this issue that we're talking about, perhaps some loss of control or loss of numbers around the table, was always ultimately going to happen. So I don't think this has materially changed any of that.
Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, through the chair. I would speak for the motion. We are elected here, as I say, as Hurunui District Council. There are lots of variables in the future which we don't have our crystal balls to gaze into. We are aware of them. We can see some of those things coming up, and so we just need to get on and make sure that we give the best opportunity for the best provision of water for our constituents while we are the Hurunui District Council, and show a model that can work for the future, which hopefully this team will be able to do, which we can then push out into a wider unitary authority as and when that lands with us and on us and whatever influence we've got.
Thank you. I'd like to speak in favour of this agreement as well. I've made aware to the room about the shareholding potential issues that go forward. I think we made a commitment in the previous council before my time, and we've spent a lot of time on this, but I would like to also understand Councillor Brewerton's concerns, and I think they need to be echoed, and as long as we do have that ability to reapproach, I think we should move forward on this and give certainty to the directorship and the management over it to get on with the job, so as not to keep retarding them from their abilities. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm going to speak against, simply because the way that the motion is worded doesn't allow us to revisit it all. And that aside, we have a seconder who is spoken against because of process. So I have absolute faith in the Kaikoura Hurunui Water Services that we have set up. I'm simply looking for that pause to get that little bit more information that we are going to have over the next week. So I'm not against the document, the transfer agreement that's in front of me, but I'm against passing it today.
Trying to speak for. I understand the concerns with the uncertainty in the future, and I think if we were talking about setting up the Kaikoura Hurunui Water Services Limited, I would understand putting it on pause. But because we are actually only talking about transferring the assets into that company, whatever happens in the next month or two, I don't feel actually changes at all if we put those assets into that company. And as it's been pointed out, if we don't put our assets into that company, then we have to look at how we actually, or what our relationship is with that company, because it does actually change the whole dynamics of what that company stands for, and also then how we operate as a council alongside that company. So, and that was never the intention of that company when it was set up. So I, as I say, bewilders me a bit to why we would want to actually delay this, because to me, whatever happens, we're simplifying local government, doesn't actually change if we put those assets into the company.
Anybody else like to speak for or against this motion? I am going to speak in favour of this motion. I would like to reinforce the fact that what Chris Scarlett has identified, with both Chris and Steve actually, and Dave previous, when we were in question time. I believe that we have set this company up for the very best intent, and without that ability, we are at risk, and we place some extra risks around this. I feel this is the next step of this process, and I am confident that we can enter into this transfer agreement with confidence for the Hurunui district at large. as we know it today, and I'm heartened by Steve's comments around, we don't know our future, so we need to make a decision for today, on today's knowledge, with the best intent for the outcome we are seeking and have always sought. So I will speak in favour of this recommendation. Any further comments?
Madam Chair, by giving the company, the entity, the strength to go forward when the simplification period does get pushed onto us, it gives them a stronger footing to be able to not only negotiate, but for us to negotiate and use it in our favour as opposed to not in our favour. And so by showing any cracks, that would diminish our ability to negotiate with that asset later on. That's partly why I'm thinking.
Thank you, Chris. If there is no further speaking for or against the motion, I am ready to put that motion. And I will ask you to raise your hand. So all in agreement, in favour, please raise your hand. Did you get those? No. Can you raise your hands by? Sorry. 9. Thank you. Those against?
Simply was seeking a pause, but not that I'm against the.
And you're abstaining?
Because of the position I find myself in, being trapped of having moved it and then not being happy, I feel it's been right for me to abstain and let the room decide.
We'll have that recorded, Robbie. That motion is carried. Can I just make a final comment? I totally respect everybody's concern around this process and the wedge that we find ourselves in. But I'm grateful for the manner in which you all entered into that discussion and debate, and that all of your questions are valid. But can I just say to Ben, as the CEO in the corner there, please know that we are, have the backing of the company and the process, but you will, and I guess I'd ask you to convey to the board the incredible squeeze that we are under at the moment. I think I just can't describe how much pressure. I'll just leave it there. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you very much.
Well done. Rightio, I'm not sure whether this next paper is any less complex, to be fair, but we've got the good fortune of Kirsty. Are you going to come and talk to us? Hopefully it's less complex. Oh, you.
Good luck.
Right, well, we've all read this paper, Kirsty, and actually it's lovely to have you round our table again, and I know how well you're respected and how much knowledge you have of this place, and I know how fortunate we are to have you, representing us in this context. So thank you. But I think, as the expert, I'm going to pass it over to you, and you can talk us through this, and then we'll see where we get to. Does that sound okay with you?
That sounds lovely.
Perfect, thank you.
So under the Local Government Water Services Act, 2025.
Sorry, just 99. Yep. You go.
We have a legal obligation to carry out an assessment of communities' access to drinking water services. So this is about an assessment not just of council or KHWS drinking water supplies. It's about private water supplies, self-supplies. It's any arrangement for how people get their drinking water. So what we're looking for today is officer is recommending that the council approves the assessment that's been done, and that you authorise that we submit this to Taumata Arowai and publish it on the council's website. So the legislation actually requires that this is submitted to Taumata Arowai and is published for public access. So currently I'll just go through the summary. We have submitted a draft to the Water Services Water Authority, Taumata Arowai. So the deadline was actually the 1st of July to have these assessments done. So we did submit a draft acknowledging that it had not gone through council approval at this point. So this assessment was completed in-house. It utilised a lot of our existing information from our drinking water, water safety plans, our source water risk management plans, existing data on our GIS systems, rating database, and asset or our activity management plans. So the main findings in the full report, which I think was an appendix to this council report, was that in terms of council water supplies, the treatment plant upgrades that have been completed over the last 3, 4, 5 years have substantially improved community access to safe drinking water. The Balmoral scheme is obviously still the exception there. We don't have the protozoa barrier in place on that scheme. We are looking at options with the acceptable solutions pathway for that scheme. So that is one area that has been highlighted in this report. The report actually requires us to pinpoint areas for Taumata Arawai that would require notification to them, either where a community doesn't currently have access to compliant water, or that there's some other deficiency with the service that they're being provided. So the report does highlight that Balmoral for that community is in that, meets that kind of definition. So the report looks at demand growth, and so highlights Amberley and Hamner Springs in particular as communities where with growth in those communities, that there is some pressure on those water schemes in terms of the amount of water available. It highlights some other risks around access to water in terms of quantity, with things like our resource consents, some of them being up quite high in terms of our utilisation. Other risks around water supplies that we have a single source water. So in terms of resilience for those schemes, there are some risks there with natural hazards. So the report does acknowledge that in terms of our knowledge on the non-council water supplies, it's fairly limited. So Taumata Arawai did do a data release, which was information known to them about private water supplies. So that was based on like lab data, where someone had tested their water supply and then the lab notified results to Taumata Arawai. And it also included the private water supplies that had actually already registered with the authority. That was really limited. There wasn't really much that helped us with this assessment and their data. So with the report really acknowledges with the data that we have available, we're not making too many comments about the quantity or the quality of private water supplies in this report. The report did find that there are over 1,800 properties with buildings existing on the property that we don't charge a water rate to. So that's kind of an indication that those properties have some other form of access to water, self-supply, or potentially a small network supply that we don't actually know about yet. The report did find 18 other private non-council water supplies that we know about, in terms of either a network supply, a camping ground, a self-supply, where they have got their own alternative source of water. So the other matter that we did meet the criteria in terms of notification to the authority was the camping ground in Hamner Springs, private camping ground, where there was that waterborne disease outbreak. So Taumata Arawai were already aware of that situation and already are aware of the corrective actions that have been taken in that case. So there was nothing new in terms of notification to the authority.
Sorry for you, Madam Chair. Hamner Springs Forest Camp is now connected to the town water supply. Could the report be altered slightly to say that there have been steps taken to remedy that situation so that it is crystal clear that the water supply is now on the town supply? I think that would be helpful for Hamner and for the Forest Camp.
Certainly, yeah, I'll take that to the latest. Cool.
It's great. Good point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. Thanks, Kirsty. I was gonna suggest that, but I won't go there because Tom's already done that very eloquently. No questions actually about the report, and so I hope I'm not getting off track here, but it led me to section 69 of the Water Services Act, and then I read on. And it's interesting that as a territorial authority, we're expected to do this, not just now, but then every 3 years. So I was just wondering, and as I say, it's a little bit off topic from this, but given that we have set up a CCO, externally, the Hurunui, I'm talking about Hurunui Kaikoura, we're still expected to do this as a territorial authority every 3 years, and so yet we've transferred our staff to the new WISCO. So how in the future, are territorial authorities expected to undertake this work and have the knowledge required to do what you've so very well done at this point in time?
Through you, Madam Mayor. It's my expectation that we'll contract the services of Kirsty from the WISCO and utilize her services, her expert services to deliver these reports into the future.
Yeah. Really interesting part of the legislation. It still requires us to do that as a territorial authority.
Yeah. Through the chair, I think the legislation does specifically allow that. Or it does kind of accept that these arrangements have been set in place, and that may be the best approach is to request that the WISCO.
Anyway, thank you, and I'm most happy with what you've provided us.
Thanks for that comments, Pauline. That's well received. Thank you. Vince.
Oh, great, yeah, thanks, Kirsty. Just I was looking on page 106, and it's got the Blythe scheme, and it's a wee bit of an outer because there's actually no self-supplies that's got written on it. How do you know there is? Because I just look at all the other parts of the area and they've all got
106. My page numbers doesn't quite match up with
it's overall drinking water.
Oh yes,
yeah, that's the last one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think essentially that data where we used the rating database and looked at where there were buildings and we weren't rating for water, didn't actually, there was no property within the Blythe network that was in that position. So yeah, I'm not saying our data is 100%.
The other question I was going to say, over in the Muri, with your map, there's a lot of self-supplies in the lower end towards the Waia River. How is the nitrate level in those wells? Because they're right at the sort of the bottom end. Have you done any testing of those wells?
We don't test private wells for anything. There has been the Greenpeace, didn't they? Greenpeace did a whole lot of private water supply testing where people, could just take in a water sample. It didn't go to a laboratory, but they had a portable test method for nitrate that they tested on the spot. So that data, it is publicly available. I can't actually speak off the top of my head about what the results were in that area. I know around Parnassus up that way, there were quite a few quite elevated nitrate in private wells around that area, but off the top of my head, I can't speak for
I just through conversations with people who've done tests, have told me that it's been quite high, and I thought I don't seem to have concern with it. But, and when you look at the geography of it, it looks pretty understandable to be
the lower end.
Yeah,
just cumulative effect.
It's right, it's where all the water goes.
Yeah.
So and you look on this map, there's a lot of blue dots on it.
Yeah, there is that little area around there where we've actually got a gap with the reticulated schemes, where there is a bit of a cluster of self-supplies in that area.
Any other questions around for Kirsty, perhaps in regard to the reason, but actually the report in itself. If it's not, is someone willing to look at the recommendation as written on page 99? Yeah. Even though Steve, thank you. All in agreement that, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Thanks, Kirsty. Really appreciate all of this work. I mean, it's a, you know, it's one of those jobs that we need to do, but having someone else with their own expertise to compile this is really important. Really appreciate the work. Thank you. Right, councillors, we've got a 2 or 3 papers, a couple of papers from Jason. Page 129. Thanks, Jason. And this is in regard to an exemption for the process. So thanks through that. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, the first request is an exemption for Kaikoura Huranui Water Services under Section 7 of the Local Government Act. We've received some guidance from the DIA on how to deal with reporting requirements for new water service entities. The issue we have with Kaikoura Huranui Water Services, they're not formally a water entity yet until we do transfer the assets. So up to the end of June 26, even though they were had been formally incorporated and there had been transactions, it needs to be treated as a CCO rather than a water service entity. I think the IA are making it up as they go, but be that as it may, on page 138, they've given a wee bit of a flow chart on what we need to consider, and also our auditors have discussed it with me as well, what we need to just need to do and consider for this financial year only, because on the basis that it is the assets are transferred, that doesn't happen, that will be a different story, that it will be a water service entity that needs to do reporting consistent with that. But in the meantime, as a CCO, it needs to comply with the Local Government Act. And the issue we have with that all CCOs need to have their audited annual reports completed by the end of September. And there is just a fear that we don't have time to complete an audit. I've done the annual report, but the requirement to have it audited is a capacity issue that we need to just work our way through. So the DIA have heavily suggested that if we exempt it from reporting requirements under the Local Government Act, just buys us some time. But we, unfortunately, because we were so keen to get the company incorporated, we did that on the 23rd of March 2026. Under the Financial Reporting Act, we're 7 days away from not needing to do an annual report at all. So it's very technical. Just a suggestion from the auditors is that, and from the DIA, is that we exempt it from the Local Government Act. It doesn't preclude us from needing to do an annual report, but we've got to the end of November to complete that.
And this exemption will, well, layman's language, this exemption will only be applied because of the, the timing or the incompleteness of this annual year that we are focused on.
Correct. Yep. And the fact that, up to the end of June, if we had transferred the assets at the end of June, it would have been a water service entity. It would have we would have needed to comply with all the requirements. It's just under the Companies Reporting Act, we can't present an annual report longer than 15 months, and 15 months and 7 days is too far. But regardless of any exemption, we will have an annual report that will be presented to council, adopted before the end of November. Auditors are looking at their capacity. They may actually be able to achieve it before the end of September, and then all of this is moot. But we are just making provision to provide that exemption. But I'm requesting a provision to make the exemption for this year only.
I think we understand that. It's a timing variance, Jason. And I think Fiona is willing to move it.
Willing to move
Yeah.
it, yes.
And Tom's willing to second that if there's no further questions and we understand the intent. All in agreement, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Those against, that motion's carried. Thank you. And Jason, you're going to stay at the table because we've got another one looking for the Hiranui Holdings Limited. And that would be, yeah, that's a relative. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. This one is, a little more routine. We have another CCO in Hiranui Holdings Limited. It was originally a roading company that we owned, and it has ceased trading since 2010. We withdrew all the funds that were sitting in the company at that point. It doesn't trade. We retain it because there are approximately $750,000 worth of taxable losses that we can apply to a taxable entity should we ever have one. So for the sake of recording it as doing a company return, as far as the Companies Office is concerned, that is the only requirement we need to do every year. If we don't exempt it, it needs to go through an audit, even if it is a shelf company doing nothing. And last time we did that was in 2009, and that audit cost us $1,500 at that point. So it is a way of just preventing some compliance requirements for something that doesn't.
Thank you. I think it's relatively easy to me as well to consider this exemption. Thank you for giving us a description around that, Jason. So with that in mind and with the understanding of what this is about, this is something we're going to look at the recommendation on page. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Chris Carthy. Any other queries or questions? Motion all in agreement, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, that motion's carried. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate that. So, councillors, we are now, I wouldn't say racing, but we are moving into our discussion item, and we have got in front of us a report from Mayor's Task Force for Jobs. This is an update, and I invite Anna to the table to provide us an overview of what she has been doing in regard to Mayor's Task Force. So welcome, Anna. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I really appreciate this. I do waffle, so I will try and keep it short and sweet. I am excited to be here. It's been a big year. A lot has happened, and I just want to give you a brief overview of the 25-26 contract that I have been through. So Mayor's Task Force for Jobs. If we look at the first slide there, we're referring to points 1 to 9 on the report that I sent through. But just if you don't know about Mayor's Task Force for Jobs, in a nutshell, 25 years ago, it was created in Christchurch by Gary Moore. So the mayor there saw an opportunity, majority for apprenticeships. He challenged 7 local mayors and said, right, we need to focus on youth employment. So training, education, mainly apprenticeships, and this is where the focus was. So 25 years later, we're now a community employment program, fully funded by MSD, and it's been with the Hiranui Council for 6 years. And I'm coming into my 3rd, which is very exciting. So looking at slide 2, we have here, these points are referring to 15 to 17 in the report. Now, Mayor's Task Force for Jobs has a contract. Each year the contract changes. So the contract for me for 25-26 looks like this. So up at the top there, you'll see it says 8 MSD and 7 NEETs. You may look at that and say, what is this? So MSD means clients that are referred through from MSD receiving a job seeker benefit. They believe, MSD believe when they send them that they are job worthy. So they have a license, they've got a CV, they've had prior skills, and they're ready to step into the next employment. And NEET is not in education, employment, or training. So primarily they are 16, 17-year-olds that can't receive the benefit, they've come from school and looking for that next step in their life. So my contractual goal for 26-27 was 15 sustainable placements. A sustainable placement is 30 hours a week, 6 months plus work. So this is what my target was. I very proudly achieved 29 long-term placements. So 14 of those came through MSD and 15 of those were NEETs. So that meant that they lasted that 6 months, 30 hours plus or more a week. And with that had 59 total placements. So placements, for example, Proceed, are now in there, they've really hit hard with their the bagging of their trees now. So last year I got a phone call saying, Anna, right, 20 placements, let's go now. So I had to scramble a little bit, but that's an example of the casual or the fixed term roles, also Tiki Wines. There's a few places that do take on, but just for that, doesn't quite hit that 6 month mark. So that was amazing. That very proud of, and yeah. So looking at the hospitality and retail, so that was sort of 23% of my outcomes. Forestry, agriculture, 36%, and then the trades, 17%. I'd just like to take a wee moment to the photo there with the agriculture with in the milking shed. So there's a few people in this room today that I would like to celebrate in that regard. Dave, thank you. That is Manny there. In the trades, we've got TK there with Country Estate, Beck Steve, and also both of these employers have taken on someone else since at the end of this contract as well. So MTFJ in a nutshell looks like someone will be referred to me. I'll help them with CVs, assess where their needs are, assess where I can help with additional training like forklift, barista training, chainsaw quad if that would advance them into their roles, site safe, and also then I have to become a little bit of a detective in the sense of a lot of people come to me lacking confidence, not knowing where they want to go, need to sort of peel back the layers and figure out where are you best suited and what industry, and then from there hopefully a successful placement comes. Driving is a massive investment from MTFJ. A lot come on their learners. A lot of 19, 20-year-olds don't even have their learners, which is quite surprising. So I invest a lot into that. We have a local gentleman, Graham from Eyes on the Road, that I put a lot of people his way actually. So he holds our defensive driving courses to help people get their full. He also does the learners and the restricted lessons too. So my goal is driving, get you to at least your restricted, and then we can, then you've got availability to access jobs out of the region too. So looking at the next slide, this points to points 21 to 25. So key achievements this year, we've had 17 new employers, which has been fantastic. And that really has come from cold calling and also seeing jobs advertised online. So then I personally approach, not stalk, but find, and then approach them and suggest what MTFJ can do to help and support. And then, yeah, thankfully they've come on board. And then, yeah, 29 businesses in total. So how people enter the program, most come through recommendations. A few come from MSD. Last year we didn't have a lot come from MSD, unfortunately. We have 25 available job seekers that are receiving the job seeker benefit in the Hurunui right now. So that makes my job a little bit tricky if my target is, say, 10 MSD applicants into work when there's only 25 in the whole of the Hurunui. So I understand I don't get a lot of referrals, but a lot of MSD referrals actually approach me too. So majority friends, family, schools, if they have someone that they know are needing a safety net because they're leaving school, they then get referred to me as well. And yeah, so that's right, thanks. Funding. So each year is very different with MTFJ. It started 6 years ago. The funding pot was very big then, but then they had to do 50 placements. So each year it tends to, the placements become smaller, but then also the funding pot becomes smaller as well. So 25-26, I started the year with 120,000. The 24-25 year, there was 2 of us, so we had 2 coordinators in the role. Unfortunately, the funding was decreased by $56,000. So that meant there wasn't a wage for a second coordinator. So unfortunately, 2 became 1, but that also meant that I needed to wear multiple hats. So the other coordinator was doing the employment support, and so that's something that I picked up as well. With it too, there's a lot of pastoral care with this too. So although, yeah, I should talk about that later actually.
Yeah,
we'll go on that one later.
Yeah, I don't want to rush it, but I know we're tight on time
Yeah,
as well, so,
yeah. I've got so much to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so with the funding, so funding was cut quite dramatically, which meant that I couldn't offer employers packages. In an ideal world, I offer all the training, I offer the driver support. I can also offer a wee bit of a buffer for a wage support subsidy for the employers as well. If they're coming through MSD can offer that too, like a flexi wage, apprenticeship boost. There is money for employers, but with the funding cut, I unfortunately just didn't have as much to put towards it. But some employers are okay with that. They don't actually want the funding; they just want a good candidate, which is great. Yeah, so that's where my funding went. Some of the challenges this year I found was job seekers not wanting to communicate or participate. So initially they were guns blazing, but then once that first meeting was over, they just didn't really want to engage. So lost quite a few of referrals in that manner. Just down the bottom there, one challenge that I have moving forward is the future contract. So my future contract, I'm actually not quite sure what it looks like yet, but what I do know, as of the 1st of July, I needed to wipe my slate clean of clients. So this is the MSD requirement, and now I'm only allowed to work with candidates for 12 weeks. So what that does is put a little bit of intensity into the employment program. So when I meet someone, I have 12 weeks and I voice this straight away. So in the last few years that I've worked with MTFJ, I've noticed some people take 2 weeks, some people take 6 months, some people unfortunately might take 1.5 years to find work. Everyone comes in different ages and different stages, but now we do have 12 weeks. So I'm just trying the best I can to do as much as I can to propel them into work in that 12-week bracket. Okay, next. Why this matters. So just looking at that photo on the right, Blake came to me, age 17, weight of the world on his shoulders, lost, didn't know what to do. Right there you see him holding an award for Wholesome, a Wholesome, massive international concrete industry partner, and he won the New Zealand award and has been in the company for 2 months. And that right there is just gives me shivers, because he's he could quite easily got very lost in the world, but right now he's aiming for CEO of Wholesome. And he's verbally voiced that. Yeah, so that's why this matters. Like it's a really amazingly special program. It's fully MSD funded, which I sort of should have said right at the start. So the only thing that, so council is here for support, but all the financial backing comes from MSD. So ideally local pathway employments. And I do just want to reflect that this aligns with council strategies, but this was reflective in the 25-26 when this was written. So yeah, I know things have changed a little bit, but this aligns with when it was written in for the 25-26 contract. And then just looking at the next slide here, collaboration. This is something that I really I'm very proud of as well. We have a lot of collaboration within the youth partnership team. So SEED program in conjunction was sort of started because NTFJ contract kept having restrictions, and I couldn't help with the CV building, the interview skills, just those day routines to help people become work ready. So SEED program was initiated, and from there we get a lot of candidates from the SEED program that then morph into NTFJ. Dave is, he understands that because he took on a SEED program candidate. Also, there's been this gentleman in the photo there. He was a water meter reader for the HDC, but he came to me with a degree in computer science and offered him a job as a water meter reader, and he said yes, which, because I essentially may have been poking quite a few IT people and going, I've got this guy, he really needs to be a part of HDC. So he came in as a water meter reader, and then I funded him as a 4-month cadetship within IT after that. So he's now got a foot in the door and yeah, getting some industry experience, which was great. And also, there's been a few other placements within HDC as well. So next steps are my financial year's just begun on the 1st of July, and we've got new targets, new funding, new reporting requirements. Can't really comment on that right now, but will as soon as I know what they are. And then my focus is, employer relationships, building strong relationships with contractors of HDC. This is a big dream of mine, to entice them to be taking on those entry-level workers as well. And also, potentially more employment entry-level within HDC too. And just one last, in the last 8 days, we've placed 6 into work, 1 into apprenticeship, 1 into full-time, but 4 into seasonal. So although it's 6, maybe 2 will be an outcome of that. So just wanted to finish on that note. But yeah, thank you.
Fantastic.
Easy.
Thank you for that presentation and that very thorough update. I really appreciate all the work you do and coaching these young people into be a better version of themselves, really. So fantastic. So, but is there any quick questions of Anna? We all just acknowledge your work. Thank you. Oh, Pauline and then Fiona.
Oh yeah, thanks. And thank you so much for what you do, Anna, because I can feel the passion in the room. You've got so much to tell us, and I think this is a fantastic program. I've just got 2 questions. With the 12-week limitation that's now been placed on you,
yes.
How does that fit with SEED? So are young people able to do SEED and then go into NTFJ, or is that all encompassing? And then my next question is, has MSD, have they given any information as to, okay, you've had your 12 weeks, you haven't placed them, what happens then from their point of view?
Great questions. Through the chair. So yes, when they get referred from MSD to me, I meet them and then I take them on from that date as a referral, and then from that date I have 12 weeks. Mm-hmm. So we're just sort of easing this one out to figuring out how to work it. I'm not saying I'm working the system, but when they come from SEED, I will meet the SEED candidates throughout their course, and then between Nathan and I will get an indication of where they might be wanting to go. I can then start sort of planting seeds in industries or potential jobs, but then I don't really have to take them on the day they finish SEED. I can be a little bit, I think we can be a little bit clever in that, it would just, keep within the guidelines, but be clever with how.
So that, because I mean, SEED is a different funding mechanism to yours, so they can do both. And MSD's take on, okay, you've had your 12 weeks.
Yeah, so we're still figuring that one out as well. So so as soon as they refer, I meet them, I take them on that day, and then there's 12 weeks. But then I ideally want to get them, and I'm quite vocal with them about it, that or to the job seekers, at least let's get a CV, you're driving, some certification, we'll get you some interviews, we'll at least, yeah, so if we do hand them back, I actually just had a phone call there before I came in here, it's a little bit heartbreaking, but we got a transfer from WIMAC to Puranui and TFJ, but then MSD have come in, and when this job seeker went to MSD went, no, you cannot work with NTFJ, because the time lapse between WIMAC to Puranui was more than 12 weeks. So, and this is when the contractor started. So I rang her and said, oh, and she went, I can't work with you anymore. And it was like, oh. So it is a little bit heartbreaking, but we just, oh yeah, I have to say right from the start, 12 weeks, and try and make it a positive experience. And that, yeah.
Fiona's got a question.
Oh, actually, more a comment really. I know Shirley worked at Proceeds,
Yeah.
and so ages ago she said, I want to get a message through to council just how impressed I am with Anna and how grateful we are for her work. And so I thought, now's the opportunity to do that for Shirley.
Oh,
So-
Shirley's amazing. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I'm happy then to move the information be received.
Thank you. Look, I think we could have questions all day, but you know, we are a wee bit time constrained, so that doesn't understand we need to do it.
Yeah.
But we do have a mover that we received the information. Someone like to second it. Thank you, Tom. All in agreement, please say aye.
Brilliant.
Okay,
Thanks,
that's
Anna.
carried. Thank you, Anna.
No problem.
Everyone's good work.
Cheers.
Fantastic. Rightio, councillors,
Appreciate
it now moves us on. We've got 4 information items to get through. The first is Jason's financial report, and then the 3 reports, which we can take on the papers, but we've really got till 12:30, so we've got half an hour to get through this and those final 3 reports. Will be probably quite quickly. So thank you, Jason. This being the report for June, so end of that financial year, but I'll hand over to you and you take us through as you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The financial report for the end of June has been presented. Now, I do state that this is for the full financial year, but there is a wide range of processes that the finance team go through to before a final annual report can be adopted. And as we move through the process, a lot of that discussion will occur with the Audit and Risk Committee. Key things around end-of-year valuations for both assets and anything that affects the financial, the operating statement as well. So even though this says it's got a $4.9 million deficit, don't be surprised if the number changes by the time we get to the annual report. But be that as it may, where we currently sit, the financial report's there from page 149. And it's in the same format for the as we've received previously. Total revenue for the period has been just under 71 million, about $3.9 million more than what we had budgeted for, and operating expenditures 75.7 million, about 2.6 million budgeted. And capital expenditure for the period, we recorded capex of 30.5 million of our almost $42 million program. So there will be projects there, non-water projects that will that had been budgeted for that hadn't been completed by the end of the financial year. So the normal course of business is at the end of August, when we've got a greater handle on the numbers. If there are any projects that specifically need to be carried forward, there will be a paper that will come to the August meeting to formally approve those. And as we normally do, we've got a capital program allowed for in the annual plan. If there are projects that are carried forward, they are just added to the capital program, and so we are able to compare apples with apples. Yeah, and then the financial report's broken down into the groups of activity statements. The first one on page 150 being water supplies. Sorry.
We spent approximately nearly 6 million or 5 million more than we expected. Or we've ended up with a deficit of 5 million, which wasn't planned.
Well, we had planned a deficit of 6.2 million. So, and again, that is primarily unfunded depreciation. Generally, the cause of the deficit, and it is something that the water companies are grappling with as well. That their annual plan shows a funding. An operating deficit of about 5 million, and again, it is purely due to the unfunded depreciation or the staging in of depreciation. If we were funding all of the depreciation, we would expect that we'd have no deficit at all. That's not the case, and it has not been the case for some time.
So is this added to our overall debt, or because it's depreciation, it is purely a paper? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. That's just to satisfy myself.
No, that is it's the exact question of actually getting from the director's report. Yeah.
Thank you.
So the water supplies, our revenue up on the budget, our expenditure is higher than in budget, and key variances, as we've observed right from the start of the year, that their electricity expenses are over budget. But we've also, in this budget, we've got the cost relating to the setup of the Local Water Done Well project, and significant amount of that has been funded from grants. So we are not, as some councils, incurring a large amount of debt for the setup of the company. That is then transferred to the company and then needed to be recovered through interest rates. I know it was discussed at the last meeting about particular projects relating to water, sewer and stormwater that haven't been done. A similar exercise will need to take place with the company to identify those projects that need to be carried forward. We had, during the budget process, had forecast that those projects will be completed by the end of the financial year. So it hadn't been completed by the end of the financial year, but we also haven't incurred the debt relating to those projects. So yeah, lesser assets, but lesser debt. Overall, it'd be the same net position that's going in. So page 151 is sewer. Again, incomes up on budget. Expenditure altogether is down on budget, and there's some variances there, particularly some consultants and some desludging or sludge management costs. And again, if there are items there that need to be carried forward, that will be determined by the board. Page 152 is stormwater to round out the three waters. And apart from the item of vested assets, there are a number of projects there that will need to be carried forward.
I'd like to go back to page 151 if I may. Bottom of the line, June 26 actual capital expenditure. Just clarity on this. I see CapEx to improve levels of service. What would that encumber? Seek it up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 4.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So when we set the budget for capital works, it's broken down into three key items. One is capital required because of growth, capital required to improve the levels of service, and the last one is renewals of. So the difficulty with a lot of projects, particularly in water, is determining what component is just replacing the asset.
Right.
What if you increase the diameter of a pipe, for instance, is that providing improved levels of service, or is it providing for growth? So it is it's a difficult one to really identify exactly with huge amount of accuracy the component or the category that it sits in. A lot of the improved levels of service relate to new treatment plants that we've developed over the process. And page 160 will sort of break it down. Well, it's probably not broken down into those three categories, but it provides the key projects that we have been working on. Pump shed upgrades are actually, we consider those to be improved levels of service. They're not there because of growth, and they're not just replacing what was always there, because that would just be renewals. When it is an upgrade, it is sort of upgrading it to meet higher levels of service.
So it's more of an upgrade of existing product or service. Give or take some flexibility in that statement. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Page 153 is roads and footpaths, and there is a large recorded overspend in operating expenditure, but on the same side of the coin, less has been spent on capital expenditure. Now it's always a wee bit of a trick to work out what is purely maintenance and what is renewals. So from an accountant's point of view, renewals is capital and maintenance is operating, but in the engineering speak, it's a little bit different. It's not quite as nuanced as that. So we'll certainly go through the transactions relating to roading and make sure that the categorization is appropriate, but ultimately it comes from the same funding source. So we don't have a different funding source for capital as we do for operating. Sorry, Chris. Yeah.
So just on roading, are we seeing much of an increase in costs coming through with diesel? Has that?
Madam Mayor, we've received an application, and we're just evaluating it at the moment for an increased subsidy for the increased fuel charges. It's not, roading's not the only one. We've had other service providers request that too.
Bearing in mind that we did increase the physical or the cost of operating in capital by 15% in the current budget to sort of try and make allowance for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the chair to the Chief Operations Officer, and reflect to that statement, how often have we had that application put before you? How often have you had applications for that put before you for the fuel increase?
Oh, Madam Mayor, we've got two currently.
I just, how do you work that? Because when our bulk fuel comes in, just about every tank loads a different price. So do you actually, if the fuel price, because it's been quite volatile lately, and when it drops down, do we get a credit back? You just about have to have the actual from those people. They need to show you physically, this is how many litres of diesel we got in this time period.
Madam Mayor, that's exactly exactly the data that we're after. So it's based on open book. So we get to see all of the transactions. Bearing in mind that some of these vehicles are, there might be 9 vehicles over a 3-month period. So we've got to go through all of those transactions to make sure that they're legitimate, and any private use or any use that's outside of the contract is removed. So yeah, it's quite in depth for us to go through and clarify all of that. But
yeah, that's just a process that we defined or defined, and we're working through it.
You're right, there is a bit of a change, you know, depending on the, where you go as well, notwithstanding the bulk that you're talking about from home. Yep, those questions, Dave, thank you.
Well, in our industry, it's not rocket science. When the contractor sends a bill in, there's a fuel adjustment factor put on the bottom of the account based on the fuel. I don't know how they work it out, and I've questioned it, but there's industry standards. So is it because you're on contracts that they send your bill and they can't have a, and then the question is, the fuel adjustment factor is based on the diesel price of whatever job. So, but we're in a different industry because it's called milk and the dairy industry, so it's on everything. Fuel adjustment factor. There's a science in it.
So I guess the response to the question is that.
Do we have that on every account that's sent in?
Oh, Madam Mayor, I mean, most of all of our prices are established pricing. And we know that the fuel price has been adjusting the way it has been over the last several months. So rather than just having an arbitrary percentage put onto the bill, we're only interested on the specific instances where it applies to any given activity that incurs additional fuel. So we've got to work through every fuel bill that they send it.
So it's a supplementary. I don't know how they charge it. You're on a contract. If they charge you for 10 hours of digger time or 10 hours of truck time, it's usually a fuel adjustment factor. They don't do that. You have an hourly rate and it's not adjusted.
Exactly right. So we have a agreed contract rate, and that's the agreed contract rate, and they don't get to unilaterally adjust that by anything. They come to us and they say, look, we're struggling here, the fuel price has gone up, and they need to feel some pain just as much as the ratepayer feels some pain. So just because the fuel price has gone up X amount doesn't mean they're going to get X amount added on. And if you look at the way a lot of tax work, and just add a percentage onto the total bill, completely arbitrary. So we don't allow that. It doesn't happen.
And I think that's the question. There's been an example, Tom, from Hamner Springs, wasn't it? And I think, Dan, you raised the question with the process through the community board, and that factor, that variation of fuel pricing factor was reduced because the question that you posed with. So that, you know, there's some evidence that is happening, and I guess what I'm hearing is that we're getting evidence of it. We've got two examples live that you're talking about, but we just don't, as a council, you're questioning the process to, you know, be considerate to the pricing increase that we're all facing. I think that's what I'm hearing. Yep. And with that, everybody, let's move on. Thanks.
Okay, page 154 is climate adaptation. Key thing here, what we carried forward or allowed from the budget related to Motnau Beach, the development of Motnau Beach, and that progressed as quickly as we had allowed for.
Yes, around that, I mean, that's obviously a piece of work we're going to have to workshop, thrash it down the track, but we've got 360 and the income was based around that. And so we've given ourselves a loan there, and the internal interest paid 247 and internal interest. Is that just a money go around, or is that?
Yeah, well, the interest paid, we haven't incurred any significant expense for Motnau Beach, and the 360,000 was our original budget of sections that would be sold for the year. So it is that flows on. The internal interest relates to the interest cost relating to the retreat, the proactive relocation project. So the interest cost on the purchase of the land and
that's nothing to do with Motnau.
Not to do with Motnau, no. So this so under this category we've got We've got the Bund at Amberley Beach, we've got the proactive relocation project, we've got project relating to Motnau Beach, but also here, and I see right at the bottom of page 1, number 4 in year to date, I seem to have cut off the explanation, the 104,000 that's been spent to date relates to the Buxton project, which is getting funded largely externally. So that was the cost that had been incurred up to the end of June.
You said you cut that one off, that one, I leave it to my question on the next page. Down the bottom, CapEx to improve levels of service. We had a budget for the year of 3.2 million, and we spent 3 million less than that. And it's going to be explained on number 8, and number 8's fallen off the bottom of the page. I was wondering what number that was.
I will send you all an updated version of
Yeah, I just, I mean, that's huge. Discrepancy. I wonder what that's about.
Largely, the biggest component of that in the budget, we had provision for developing a sports field in Hammer Springs that had been specifically deferred. We had $2 million associated to that project in the long-term plan that just followed through into the annual plan, and none of that has been progressed. So that is the bulk of that project. There are some projects in there relating to Amberley township reserves that have been spent today, and again that would be identified for potential projects that are carried forward. So my apologies, I was frantically trying to do about 4,000 things at once. So we had his print there. Okay. Page 155. Their revenue is higher than what we have budgeted. Their expenditure is lower than what's been budgeted, but part of that is employment costs that need to be allocated from corporate services into this account, and the but projects like the $2 million for the Hammer Springs sports ground won't be a project that will be carried forward. That will just need to be approved as a long-term plan, because there will be no intention that that work needs to be done. Another component of that that is the demolition of the buildings as well. So, page 156 is regulatory services, and a few variances for the year. Overall, their income is down, and Cheryl's provided a bit of a breakdown there. Key area is building control. We were about almost $200,000 less income than we had budgeted for. But our operating expenditure, our wage costs are lower than what was budgeted for, but the operating expenditure, direct expenditure is higher than we had budgeted for, and that does relate to key resource consents that are on the go, particularly Far North Solar. 157 is thermal pools. So the first cut of the financial report for the thermal pools shows a surplus, a cash surplus of 3.3 million, which is about 350,000 lower than what we, and that was certainly identified doing the forecast for the annual plan had identified. Page 158 is corporate and governance corporate key areas of the year as well. Other income is higher than budgeted. Some key variances highlighted there. Expenditure is higher than budgeted for, particularly in employment costs, and that is the process of now that we've completed the financial year, going back and making sure that the employment costs have been allocated appropriately to the other components within the organisation. You can see right on the front page, we're about $250,000 lower in employment costs overall. Sorry, Tom.
Sorry, Jason, yeah, thank you so much. Just on that page 158, note 4. We've got corporate services acting as a holding account until an end of year review and internal allocation complete. Is that what you were just talking about then? Is that sort of clear up at the end of the year of making sure everything's allocated?
Correct, yeah, and it is, and part of that has been just making sure that particularly our gardening team and utilities team had been recording their time appropriately, and there will be there's certainly a wash up that's done at the end of the year.
Perfect, thank you.
Right, the final page of the financial report is just the earthquake recovery, and that's out of all of them, that's the one that's closest to the budget. As we've done in the past, provided the full breakdown of the capital expenditure projects on page 160 to 163. And again, as I mentioned, as we go through and have confidence that we've got all of the costs relating to the financial year recorded against the capital projects, that there will be the process of identifying those projects that need to be carried forward, both here at council and also the water companies.
So any projects of money there to carry forward, you've got marked off for the new does the work.
Yeah, and as because if the work hadn't been done, we had budgeted for it to be done, or forecast for it to be done by the end of June, and had funded that from debt. So the end result at the end of the year, the amount of assets that we transfer across will be lower, but the amount of debt that we transfer across will be lower as well. So the initial forecast suggested the amount of debt relating to Three Waters that will transfer to the company would be 78.4 million. I'm expecting that to be, closer to 70 million than 78.
So I'm just trying to work out, because there was a carryover with the Jed River project and there's more work to be done. And I have asked here, is that money, because it was a $90,000 budget, spent 27 or something.
Yes.
That seems to have disappeared off the spreadsheet, the remaining money. So, to get that project off the ground, you won't have any money in your budgets.
We'll certainly identify, we'll go through the full capital expenditure program against the budget and make sure that I'll mark it down to make sure it's not, certainly not forgotten about.
Is that the funding that was going to be taken out of the stormwater account into another?
No, that's a different one.
Different project, okay, sorry.
That's Woolshed Creek.
Yeah, okay, right.
Yeah.
Which has just been done and has had a whole lot of damage done to it.
Okay. So you've raised your question, have you?
Sorry?
Have we got an answer? I mean, have we?
I'll talk to
you work it
Jason.
through? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, Chris.
Chair, thanks. Jason, on the 161, not really managed road footpath, bridges and structure renewals. There's several referrals to this, 1.1, 1.1, and then there's another note further down, 116,301. As these are carried forward, are we accumulating those funds and building? Because we do know that might be coming on for a challenge with bridges. Is that funds accumulative? Or are they just stagnant?
Normally they would be if we certainly if we had set the rate to fund a portion of those projects which we had, and the work hasn't been done, that would sit within the in the cost centre for roading, and be the opening balance that will carry forward. if we haven't, we won't receive the subsidies in advance, so we only receive the subsidies on work that we actually do. So but the rate money that we do receive for those projects will be sitting there and will carry forward into the next financial year. That's part of what we have built the roading reserve that we referred to earlier, up from savings that we mainly low cost, low risk projects where we didn't get the funding from NZTA for, but we actually rated for that. That had remained in the pot for roading, and it's been we've been able to use that untagged reserve to offset the cost of roading for this current year, for the 26-27 year.
Sure, so I'll come back to my question. No, that's all right, Jason. Is these 1.1 million, and there's two entries in here, and saying it's budget being carried forward because of the proposals of things and costs ahead of us, are they going to accumulate, or are they going to stagnate at the 1.1 million and just get transferred through? Is there ability for that figure to increase? We have to find Dan's waving behind me.
Cool.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve.
No, yeah, so they weren't, those budgets weren't sufficient enough to do the work that we had in originally for this year, when we set the programme 3 or 4 years ago. So we're waiting for the rollover into this financial year to couple the funds together, so that we've got enough to do the bridge replacement.
So we'll see a change in those figures after the shift over.
Yeah,
okay, thank you very much. That answers the question. Thank you. Thanks, Ross.
Thank you, Jason.
Okay, I'll whip on to the Treasury report really quickly. So I've got points to note on top of page 147 and the detail there. At the end of June, our total debt was 103 million. 87.5 was in term loans with the LGFA, 14 was in short-term debt with the LGFA, and a further 1.5 million from our Westpac facility was drawn down. I have highlighted here that there is that we are breaching our policy in respect to liquidity. We are required to have liquidity ratio greater than 110%, and at the end of June, it was 108.26. So, and that was largely due to the need to draw down 1.5 million from Westpac, just to meet their cash flow requirements, primarily because of cash flow requirements, thermal pools for their wave, your wave project. So I've just raised it that it's a breach of our policy, but it is an issue I need to actively discuss with the LGFA, because it does breach the LGFA covenants as well. So actively discuss that with the LGFA and report back to audit and risk next week, because that is a potential risk we do have.
Are there any, sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, are there any penalties or consequences that are likely to fall upon us?
I don't know. That's what I need to discuss, and I need to simply front foot it, because generally we provide a report to the LGFA at the end of November, after we've completed the annual report. There are some components in there that is just purely based on the cash, but there are other components that the LGFA look at, some financial assets that they actively offset against the gross debt, and we talked about that previously about if we have loan funding to the water company, that would be treated as a financial asset and come off the gross debt. So the other components I just need to discuss directly with the LGFA to make sure. And completely put my hand up. I lost sight of that at the end of June. There was a few other things.
Being a cash flow issue, do you see us getting back under that 100? In the future, or?
Yeah, well, currently we are, but one of the issues we do have is that 100 million of debt. The only flexible facility we've got is with Westpac for 10 million. So so we don't, we need to increase our facility or seek other facilities through the LGFA to provide that liquidity. So and that is exactly what I'll be discussing with the LGFA.
Sorry, Brett, and that's what you'll be reporting back to Audit and Risk on next week. Correct. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, can I just clarify, Jason, you mentioned that 1.5 billion was in relation to the wave pool amendment?
Yeah.
That's not scheduled to be finished in September, October, is it not?
There was significant progress payment. That was part of what they needed, some cash flow in at the end of June for, and that I mean the pools just when they've got a cash flow requirement, we just pass over that cash and record it in their internal debt. So that's what I suspected it was. So, but I didn't inquire deeply into the requirement.
Clarification is the total cost of that wave pool would be around that. So that sounds like more than a cash flow.
Total cost of the project's 3
million. Sorry, yeah, 3, but yeah.
3.5.
Okay, it just seems like
3.5, yeah.
No, it just
And
seems.
there are progress payments and a substantial progress payment on the delivery of the kit, basically.
So I mean, I guess
No, I understand
to your
your
point,
point,
but it's actually
It's quite a
keeping
significant
track on the
portion of it, yeah.
I may be unfairly blaming the pools
No,
for
no.
my lack of keeping the eye on the ball.
So I think, there'll be a curiosity in the minds of councillors that if you're not on the Audit and Risk Committee, you can access that report, that paper. So, follow that through so that you can satisfy your concern, I guess, that has been raised in that discussion that Jason's going to have with the LGFA. Yep. With that.
Right. The other key things to note is that the all up weighted cost of funds or including margin on page 165 had increased from 3.89 at the end of May to 3.94 at the end of June. And that starts to build in some of the reaction to the increase in the 90-day bank bill rate. And the cash is, you'll be aware, the official cash rate at the end of June was 10.25. Within a week, the Reserve Bank had increased that to 2.5%, and the indication is that there'll be another 25 basis points increase sometime before the end of the calendar year. And at the end of June, being the end of the quarter, we reset our internal interest rates. So, and it's based around that all up weighted cost of funds. So as that sits at 3.94%, any activity that holds debt will be charged an interest rate of 4.94. The pools will be charged 5.94, and all those are up by 0.04% from what we were charging for the previous quarter. The term deposit rate stayed at 2.85%, as was the case at the end of March. So any community that holds funds will the interest rate of 2.84, 2.85%. And the final, and this is quite belatedly finally 148 and 169 was a rate arrears report. And at the end of June, we had a total rates owing of 1.5 million. And that was offset by about $450,000 of ratepayers that had paid rates in advance. So the net amount in our rates control account was just over $1 million. That is up sharply from where we were at the end of June last year. And rolling through the age trial balance of the rates, there are a few components there, a few ratepayers that have got significant amounts owing. And I've just highlighted there that staff are actively dealing with 3 specific ratepayers to get a rates postponement structured for them. And those 3 amount to $115,000 of the outstanding rate. So, it's a big chunk in that alone.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. I mean, I've looked at the graph, it lets in the numbers from 2020 post-COVID through to today. And we're half of it, well, we're 700,000, give or take a mile up on that. And that increase, is there a noted social issue that we're seeing that's causing this?
That's my fear.
Yes.
But again, there are some in the list that you do
terms tout, but is that what you're referring to?
They're never normally a problem, but they have just at that point in time hadn't paid. But that is the concern, that the cost of living is affecting ability for people to meet our requirements. And the key is, and certainly with the rate postponement, is trying to find an alternative for the ratepayers, rather than us going down quite legal proceedings to recover. And it's normally not a problem when property has got a mortgage, because we can always pat the shoulder of the mortgagee, and they normally pay because they know the consequences of the ratepayers not paying the rates. That the council can enforce a rating sale, and the objective of the rating sale is to recover the rates regardless of the value of the property. And so it's always in the mortgagee's best interest to.
So I put a supplementary question to that. Thank you, Jason. Is this a community? Sorry, is this all spread right across the Hurunui, or is it defined on specified social areas or urban rural areas?
Yeah, I don't have it broken down to that, but that will be, that is, the process that I will go through to see whether there is a systemic issue there.
Sure. Would we be able to have that information shared with us?
In summary terms, not.
I don't want detail. I just want broad strokes, just so we can understand what communities, whereabouts. It's in our backyard. What is it we can try and do to help?
Certainly. And certainly some detailed stuff. I in the past have provided the Board and Risk Committee as well, so I will reintroduce that, because that and again, part of us not quite having that visibility on a regular basis, which we currently do now, is just being able to keep track.
Yeah, no, look, just more of a comment than anything. In 6 years, the rates owing has more than doubled, from 730 to 1.5 mil. And I too considered, what are the social implications of that? Just really interesting when I was analysing the figures, that actually we've got less people who are owing rates, 60 less than we had 6 years ago. And yet we've got a big chunk in that, in those, number 2 and 3, 5,000, well, 1,000 to greater than 5,000. So I'm really interested in that data that Chris has requested as well, to see if there are any patterns there that we can be aware of or something, but $1.5 million owing rates is, tricky for those people who do pay their rates on time. There'll be reasoning behind.
And I think, well introduced into the discusussion, and there'll be a process, but first and foremost, it will come through audit and risk committee. So we keep an overview on it, because I think that we all looked at those numbers, and it's a stark reminder of the issues that we're facing.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, I'm just conscious.
Oh, yeah, no, that's me.
Oh, that's you. So I will just bring you back, councillors. We've had a discussion around each of the treasury risk management policy, and there was an outcome from today's meeting that will be considered. And we've received the financial report for June 26th. Is someone willing to move that? Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Fiona. All in agreement with that, please say aye.
Aye.
That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Jason. I'm just going to briefly go through these reports and probably take them as read. But I'll just Graham, beg your pardon. The Lagoima request for the month. I'll just hand over you quick questions if we do.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I'm just take it through any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Jason? Thank you, Pauline.
Graham.
sorry.
Yeah, look, I have three. Are you able to elaborate on the spending on resilience, number one?
Sorry, then, Mayor, no, I can't remember that. I can't.
That'd be great, thank you. And also number 4, Rosewood proposed land use change in residential development. Is this information in addition to that's provided as part of the plan change documentation and all the reports that have been provided for that?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. It was a request for any communications with other agencies that staff had had with other agencies around the development of that proposal. Number 5 was related as well, which number 4 did cover NZTA communications, which was mostly through contractors that we used to work on that project.
And then finally, number 6, the further request for village green information. Are you able to elaborate on specifically what that information was?
It's mostly around previous decision making through reserve committee, in Embley Ward Committee, back when decisions have been made, and also including internal communications. Haven't actually completed that yet, but it's in progress.
So when you say Embley Ward, you mean prior to South Ward?
Yes, yeah, when the reserve was first being discussed.
Right, thank you. Appreciate those responses.
Robbie?
Yeah, I was just going to question number 6 too, and I wondered if it was the same source that's come 4 or 5 times, or whether or not we were able to do a reverse lagoon or something and say, where are you going with this, or are we in a position to say we've told you everything we can tell you? That's enough, thanks.
Madam Mayor, we don't question people's motivation for why they're after information. We just provide it if we can. This one is quite extensive, so it's possible we might not be able to provide it all without there being a charge, but so we're still just trying to work through it. Yes, it is the same requester mostly. We have had a few other people over the last couple of years requesting information about Eastern Reserve.
It's become almost a standing order, which is getting tiresome.
We will work that through in the order of respect and transparency. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Number 9, funny that. Private individual document regarding vehicle removal in Waikato. Is this by any chance about the bus? That's the question.
Yes.
Any other questions in regard to the Lagoima? Someone like to move that we receive it? Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, Tom. All in agreement with that, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thermal pools update. I don't think there's anything there that we need to, and I'm happy to move that we receive that information. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Tom. All in agreement with that, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, that's carried. Strategy and policy, Pauline, just a quick roundup, it's a good report here, but is there anything we need to kind of ID?
Oh, yeah, look, Madam Mayor, I'll take it as read and thank you, Graham, for getting that out in such a timely manner, given that we only had the meeting last Tuesday. It's very, very great work. I'll probably just highlight the Northern Texas Bay bylaw review, and on page 174, second paragraph, that talks about the next steps. But happy to answer any questions in regards to any of those items.
Just on the drone policy, how we going this? Because it's whole towns really now.
Policy that's been in place.
We don't advertise for those communities need to know. Because really it's just giving them the civil aviation rules about it's food, it's helicopter policy in the town, and because kids could be flying around and anyone, I know it's on reserve land, but I think that 4 kilometre thing needs explaining to the community.
Yeah, actually, the committee didn't discuss any publicity around the policy and the changes to it to bring in the helipad airspace. However, I mean, I suppose we can progress that if the council.
I just even communication, because so people know about it.
Yes, I mean, I guess to Pauline's point, it will be on the website policy. So I think next time you're at all of your community committees or your community boards, alert them to the fact that there is a policy and that they can just, take them to the website and they'll be able to read the policy.
And that also provides the application procedure if there are people who are, for whatever reason, wishing to fly drones over at one of our reserves.
So
just, they buy kids a drone for Christmas. And they go out there, they're not going to go to the website before they look at that. It's just trying to get the information out to people.
Sorry,
because how many people look at a website?
So this is a civil aviation requirement. It's not a requirement we've put in place. It's a civil aviation requirement. When you purchase a drone, you have responsibilities as a drone owner, we're not policing civil aviation requirements. We're not educating people about civil aviation requirements. These are their requirements for them to publicise and them to police.
But I take the point.
I might actually just talk to Cobber like in the budget and they put it in there. So it just makes people think, because otherwise no one's going to especially look on their website because they bought some kid. Is that a drone for Christmas?
Yeah, but certainly discuss it with your committees when you're next on your round.
I guess the same could be said about someone who buys a pool for Christmas. They still have a responsibility to uphold the rules and regulations around the safety.
Okay, so we've got a bit of an
If there's going to be a commercial operator, then they will have to go through the normal civil aviation things. The kid who's got one in the back garden, isn't it?
And to be fair, this policy has been in place. This was just a review of that policy, and the basic principles of that policy were just, moved forward into the new policy. So you're happy to move the?
I'm absolutely happy to move.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you, Chris. All in agreement that if we receive that information, please say aye. Those against, that's carried. Thank you. We've done very well, thank you, but I know we've still need a wee bit of time for lunch, but we've got, if I could ask that we move into PE, and we will take those PE matters when we come back after lunch. So we will read the reasons for public excluded and we'll agree with them. So can I please have a mover and a seconder? Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Steve. That we move into public excluded and we'll attend to those matters when we come back from lunch. And Andrea due at 1 o'clock, but perhaps we'll have 10 minutes enough for lunch. Okay, we'll be back in the room. Oh, carry that motion. Oh, yeah, sorry. Got a mover and a second and all agree we're going to public school. Please say aye. Against, that's fine. Thank you. Okay, 1:10. We'll be back in the room for lunch.